Mheshimiwa Spika, nilikuwa nimekinoa Kiswahili changu kwa ajili ya ujio wa Waziri Aisha Jumwa ili tuweze kupatana moja kwa moja. Kwa hivyo utaniruhusu nizungumze Kiswahili hicho ili kisiende bure hata kama hajafika. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwanza nimjulishe ndugu yangu Seneta wa Meru kwamba nimefanya kikao pamoja na mwenyekiti wa kamati ya usafiri Mheshimiwa Karungo Wathangwa na yule ambaye ni balozi wa nchi ya Japan kuhusu shida za trafiki katika barabara ya Ngong Road, na ametuahidi kwamba serikali ya Japan kupitia ushirikiano na serikali ya Kenya itazindua mfumo wa mabasi ya kasi katika barabara hiyo ya Ngong Road, na natumai kwamba itapelekea wewe kupata nafuu unapofika kazini hapa katika bunge la Senate. Jambo la pili, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni kwamba mimi ni baadhi ya wale ambao wanakaa katika ile kamati ya SBC ama huduma za bunge hili. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa kweli tunapata msukumo sana kutoka kwa hao wenzetu ambao tunawakilisha katika kamati ile, kwa sababu ukiangalia ratiba ya masuala ambayo yalikuwa yashughulikiwe leo hii, Mheshimiwa Enoch Wambua ametoka Kitui leo asubuhi ili aweze kuuliza masuala yake kwa yule waziri wa usafiri. Kuna masuala mengi hata mimi nilikuwa nataka nimuulize yule ambaye ni waziri wa masuala ya kifedha kuhusu mfumo mzima wa e-citizen ambao Wakenya wengi wanatusukuma tufanye kitu juu yake. Kwa hivyo ni jambo la kuvunja moyo sana, haswa kwa waziri Aisha Jumwa ambaye nilimuona juzi, Mheshimiwa Spika, akiwa maeneo ya kule Western akiwarai wakazi wa Vihiga kutoruhusu viongozi fulani kuzungumza iwapo maoni yao yatakinzana na maoni yake ama maoni ya watu wa mrengo wake. Na nilishtuka sana kwa sababu najua mawaziri wafai kujiingiza katika siasa, na aliibua hisia kali sana kwangu kwa sababu alizungumzia swala ambalo lilikuwa linanihusu wakati moja nikiwa katika eneo bunge lake.
Seneta wa Nairobi.
Mheshimiwa Spika, namaliza.
Hoja ambayo iko mbele ya Seneti kwa sasa,
naam,
ni kutokuwepo kwa mawaziri. Walioyafanya wiki iliyopita ama mwezi uliopita hayaambatani kamwe na hoja ambayo iko mbele yetu.
Nimekuelewa Mheshimiwa Spika.
Uzungumze pengine unashtumu vikali ama
ndo nachanga huo ukali, yani Spika, tafadhali.
Unaanzia mbali sana.
Kwa dakika moja tu nimalize.
Umeanzia mbali.
Yani kitu ambacho nilikuwa nataka kiibuke wazi ni kwamba mawaziri hawa wanapata nafasi ya kufanya mambo mengine, lakini shughuli ya bunge hawatilii kipaumbele. Alikuwepo kwenye mazishi, nimetoka kwenye stesheni ya redio ya KBC, wananiambia alikuwepo jana na yeye katika kituo hicho hicho. Kama anapata fursa ya kwenda mazishini kukemea viongozi, kwenda katika vyombo vya habari, kwa nini asije hapa na sisi pia tupate fursa ya kuzungumza naye? Kwa sababu dadangu Gloria, Mheshimiwa Senator Gloria Orwoba, wiki iliyopita alitukemea sana, haswa viongozi wa vyama ambao walishiriki ile mdahalo ama dialogue ambayo ilikuwepo, ya kwamba tuliwacha masuala ya kina mama nyuma. Nilikuwa nataka waziri aje hapa adhirishe kwamba si kwa kukosa kuwasilisha hoja zetu kama viongozi wa ODM, bali kuna masuala ambayo yalikuwa yanafanyika ndani ya wizara yake. Kwa hivyo ni yeye pekee alikuwa anaweza kuniondoa katika mtego uliokuwa umetegwa na Mheshimiwa Gloria, lakini sasa hayupo hapa. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa, mimi nataka nikemee vikali kukosa kuja mbele ya bunge kwa Mheshimiwa Aisha Jumwa, haswa kwa sababu wenzake wengine walikuwa na ile courtesy ya kuandika barua kwa Spika. Heshima, asante Mheshimiwa Spika, walikuwa na ile heshima kwa bunge hili kuandika barua kusema kwamba ama katesi, naambiwa unaweza sema katesi Mheshimiwa Spika. Wakaandika barua kujulisha wabunge kwamba hawatafika. Na Mheshimiwa Spika, nataka nikuombe swala moja tu. Wakati ambapo tulikuwa katika mkutano wa SBC niliuliza swala, je, kuna njia gani ya kuwajulisha wale ambao wameuliza maswala mapema kwamba maswala yao hayatapata kujibiwa kwa sababu waziri ameandika barua? Lakini nikaelezwa kwamba kutakuwa na ugumu kwa sababu wenzetu hawa wakiambiwa kwamba waziri haji na wao pia hawaji. Tunataka tu tungependa Mheshimiwa Kadhuri Murungi apambane na hali yake kule Ngong Road, afike hapa hata kama waziri hayuko tuweze ku...
Seneta Wameru, hoja ya nidhamu yako ni...
Niko kwenye hoja ya nidhamu.
Hii imeruhusiwa, hii hoja yangu imeruhusiwa vizuri na Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, sio vema kiongozi seneta wa Nairobi, yale mambo yanazungumzwa kwa mkutano SBC, ni bora kweli aje hapa kwa seneti aweze kuweka haya maneno wazi, yale yanazungumzwa kwa kikao cha SBC. Na mbona anatoa siri ya kamati ya SBC, anakuja kutoa hizo siri hapa? Sababu Bwana Spika.
Asante sana Seneta Wameru. Seneta Wameru, utendakazi wa seneti unafanyika katika ukumbi huu na pia katika kamati zetu, na hakuna siri ambayo tuweza kuificha, maanake kazi ile yote ni kazi ya seneti. Kwa hivyo seneta wa Nairobi amefanya vyema kuweka paruanja ile hali ilivyokuwa kule. Endelea umalize hoja.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kuniopoa kutoka kwa mikono ya Mheshimiwa wa Meru. Mheshimiwa, kwa kweli mimi ni mwakilishi pale SBC wa hawa wenzangu hapa, na ni muhimu kwamba yote ambayo yanaendelea pale tuweze kuwajuza, kwa sababu ulivyosema wewe mwenyewe hamna siri. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi nataka kuomba tu ya kwamba kuwe na mfumo, hata kama arafa itaandikwa kwa yule seneta ambaye alikuwa ameuliza swala mwenyewe, pasi na kuweka paruanja ulivyosema, lakini mwenye kuuliza maswala hayo ajulishe kwamba kwa bahati mbaya ama kwa sababu moja ama nyingine, yule waziri ambaye ulikuwa unataka kumuuliza maswala hatafika leo, ili watu waweze kujipanga Mheshimiwa Spika. Lakini ni vizuri tuwe hapa kwa ajili ya shughuli zingine za bunge, na natumai kwamba kikao hiki hakitatibuka kwa huu utovu wa nidhamu unaoonyeshwa na wale mawaziri kama Aisha Jumwa. Nakushukuru Mheshimiwa Spika.
Senator Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, kwani wewe utanifundisha vile nitazungumza katika Senate?
Senator Boni.
Thank
Don't
you.
engage your colleagues.
Thank you.
Talk through the chair.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I have this inkling that the minister who has failed to come rudely this morning is holed somewhere following these proceedings now, just to see how we are going to handle her case. And I want to request you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that you allow the House to exercise Standing Order number 51D. And because the minister is watching these proceedings, 51D, Mr. Speaker, states that the Senate may, where a cabinet secretary fails without reasonable cause to appear and respond to questions under this part, move a motion to censure the cabinet secretary. This minister is now ripe for motion of censure because she has never appeared before this House. And severally, we have asked her to come and respond to matters of grave national importance. She's a letdown to the...
Senator Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, kwani wewe utanifundisha vile nitazungumza katika Senate?
Senator Boni.
Thank
Don't
you.
engage your colleagues.
Thank you.
Talk through the chair.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I have this inkling that the minister who has failed to come rudely this morning is holed somewhere following these proceedings now, just to see how we are going to handle her case. And I want to request you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that you allow the House to exercise Standing Order number 51D. And because the minister is watching these proceedings, 51D, Mr. Speaker, states that the Senate may, where a cabinet secretary fails without reasonable cause to appear and respond to questions under this part, move a motion to censure the cabinet secretary. This minister is now ripe for motion of censure because she has never appeared before this house. And severally, we have asked her to come and respond to matters of grave national importance. She's a letdown to the structure of government. She's failing the executive, and with due respect, without being seen to be using the name of the president, I put it to the president that this is dereliction of duty. This minister is not fit to hold public office. If she was, she would not have failed to find time to be here this morning, and last week find time to go and consult with the leader of the opposition in waiting at his Capitol Hill office. Why does she choose to transact matters on gender, 2/3 rule, at Capitol Hill, and she cannot come and appeal the same for the same in this house? Mr. Speaker, you must use the vast powers in your possession. You protect the integrity of the Senate. A minister cannot believe that she can hold us at ransom. There are so many young women. There are so many middle-aged women. There are so many women of advanced age, Mr. Speaker, who are fit to serve this country as minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise under Standing Order number 105 on statement of fact, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the good senator from Malinya, the senator of Kakamega, has indicated that when the minister went to Capitol Hill, the minister was transacting on particular agenda, which he has said was agenda about women. Can he prove to this House that is privy to the conversation that took the minister to Capitol Hill, whether there were formal conversations or informal conversation, and whether indeed he is privy to the agenda?
Senator Eddie,
yes.
Let's have time to transact business. You know, there was a press conference after the meeting, and everything is in the public domain. So just conclude, Senator.
Mr. Speaker, I want to appeal to the young senator from Migori.
Don't appeal, just proceed to conclude your
yes,
remarks.
That if we must defend certain positions, let us defend them reasonably.
I've already told him that, Senator.
Thank you.
Just proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we worked so hard to form this government. You and I, and many others, we were not working hard so as to allow people in office, people who would then, Mr. Speaker, be tiptoeing in and out of office. We wanted people to stamp their authority so that our women, in fact, I believe, what is the name of, yes, Senator Gloria, I think she's the youngest in the House. She should be appointed the minister in place of this mama who doesn't have any idea of how important it is to appear before this House. Oh, Miraj is the youngest. She was quarreling me, that's why I did not.
If you're done, kindly take your seat. Senator Enoch Wambua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to condemn in the strongest terms possible this trend that is actually gaining root in this House, that cabinet secretaries decide whether to attend committee meetings or plenary, and they know somehow that they can get away with it. Mr. Speaker, I have argued elsewhere, and I want to argue here, that we are the people, we are the leaders, to give this House the dignity that is due to it. And it will not happen, Mr. Speaker, if we entertain a situation where honorable senators wake up early on Wednesday morning, fully aware that they are coming to interact with cabinet secretaries on matters related to dockets that these cabinet secretaries had. And out of 3, not a single CS shows up. The Speaker, in other jurisdictions, something would give. In other jurisdictions, the Speaker, the chair would stamp the authority of this House and demand that if there is a cabinet secretary within the boundaries of this country, they must appear before this House in the next 30 minutes, and that would happen. Mr. Speaker, this casual way of dealing with the Senate, and we are not even overreaching our mandate as a Senate. The Constitution, not even our standing orders, the Constitution is very clear. Article 153, on the decisions, responsibility, and accountability of the cabinet. It states very clearly, in black and white, that a cabinet secretary, I'm reading verbatim, Article 153(3), that a cabinet secretary shall attend before a committee of the National Assembly or the Senate when required by the committee and answer any question concerning a matter for which the cabinet secretary is responsible. Mr. Speaker, that statement is explicit as explicit can get. The decision by the cabinet secretary for roads, that's where I'm going to begin, because I have 2 questions that are listed for a response from the CS responsible for roads. Mr. Speaker, the CS for roads knows very well, wherever he is, that the matters that I'm raising, those questions, are matters that he addressed himself to when he was a senator in this House representing Elgeyo Marakwet. Now he is a CS, he can make a decision on the compensation of the people from Kibwezi all the way to Mwingi, persons affected by a road project, and he just decides to stay away. The Speaker, I take great exception to that decision. Lastly, on the matter of Senate CS for gender, Aisha Jumwa. Mr. Speaker, I was really excited about today's sitting because there is a matter that we would have put to rest today. There have been accusations and counter-accusations from our honorable lady senators and from the women of this country about the place of the 2-third gender rule in the NADCO report. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to have a face-to-face conversation with the CS responsible for that matter on the floor of this House, so that she can tell us what role she played. Mr. Speaker, we would have put this matter to rest today, because it is her who approached the NADCO committee and said, let us remove this matter from your discussion because there is something that I am doing and I'm very sure I will succeed. That's a matter that we would have held a conversation around today, Mr. Speaker, and settled that matter. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, I'm still pursuing the line that because you have the power, Mr. Speaker, and that power is given to you by the supreme law of the land, to demand that in the next 30 minutes, CS Aisha Jumwa makes an appearance on the floor of this Senate so that we transact that business and we get done with it. Mr. Speaker, I submit.
Senator Mungatana.
Asante sana Bwana Spika kwa kunipa nafasi na mimi nitoe maoni yangu. Bwana Spika, leo waziri wa fedha hakufika hapa Seneti, waziri wa barabara hakufika Seneti, waziri wa jinsia pia hakufika Seneti. Bwana Spika, ile kanuni ya kudumu 51D ambayo Seneta Khalwale ambaye ameitaja iko na adhabu kubwa sana kwa hawa mawaziri ambao ni kuleta hoja hapa ya kuwatoa kazini. Lakini Bwana Spika, mimi ningekuwa nimefikiria kwamba SBC wangekaa tubadilishe hii sheria ama tuiongezee na hapo chini. Mbali na kutumia nyundo kuua inzi, Bwana Spika, tungeweka kwamba iwe ni automatic ama ni mtu akikosa kufika kwa mara ya kwanza, Spika bila kuuliza swali ni $1,000,000. Mara ya pili ni $5,000,000 na mtu analipa mwenyewe, waziri analipa mwenyewe. Mara ya tatu ndio hii kanuni ya kudumu 51D iletwe hapa hoja. Na nilikuwa naomba wale wenzetu ambao wanakaa kwa SBC tutengeneze kitu ambao tunaweza kuitumia. Iwe ni automatic, sio lazima speaker akitoa ruling. Umekosa ni $1,000,000. Ukiwa umekosa mara pili ni $5,000,000. Mara ya tatu ni hoja. Iwe ni automatic, sio kitu ambao tunakuja kudebate. Hivi Bwana Speaker, tukigeuza kanuni zetu itatusaidia kupeleka message kwa hawa wenzetu ambao wamekaa kwa nafasi hizo kwamba ni lazima tuheshimu seneti na tuheshimu nafasi ambazo sisi tunafanya kwa niaba ya wananchi. Asante sana Mheshimiwa.
Senator Manzo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with colleagues who have spoken before us that Senate does not sit here, and the fact that we amended the law to bring ministers or cabinet secretaries to the House to answer questions, that just Senate doesn't sit here in vain, and that the ministers and or cabinet secretaries must take it so seriously, and that the law should then demand, I want to agree with Senator Mugatana, that it becomes very punitive unless there is a sufficient reason, and which can only be a cabinet meeting. No other reason, or maybe even if one had proved that they are unwell. But even in that position, give notice early enough. Not the way Senator Juma has done, to give a notice, this morning, to send a letter this morning, is really ridiculous. It is disrespectful to this House. And Mr. Speaker, I urge you to stamp your authority that she be awarded 30 minutes to appear before this Senate or fail the total consequences of impeachment. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chirange.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to join my colleagues in expressing strongest reservations on what we should be doing. Mr. Speaker, when we amended these standing orders, it was in the interest of all people who we represent with. We don't represent ourselves, Mr. Speaker. And this habit of cabinet secretaries not appearing when required, we used to see it in committees, but it looks like we have been lax enough that they are now taking plenary for granted, Mr. Speaker. Because I think if we were aware that Cabinet Secretary of Roads, Treasury, and Gender was not appearing, Mr. Speaker, sir, then there would be no need of scheduling them on the order paper. We would be even doing motions or bills or other statements, Mr. Speaker. So it is very unfortunate that today in the morning, Mr. Speaker, we woke up very early. And yesterday I heard through rumors, Mr. Speaker, that CSS would not be appearing. I wish in the past or in future, as my brothers have suggested and sisters, colleagues, that they should communicate to us, Mr. Speaker, because you can see I'm the heaviest casualty, Mr. Speaker, because 3/4 of questions that were to be asked was through you as truly, and the people of Nandi were glued to their TV stations, Mr. Speaker, knowing that we'll get real answers today on the status of roads, Mr. Speaker. The nation was glued that today we'll know the status of Kenya Airways and financial operations and other operations, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, many people from Kericho County would have known at the renovation and expansion of Karenga Strip in Kericho, Mr. Speaker. So I find it out of place, Mr. Speaker. I remember during Kibaki era, President Kibaki era, when President Kibaki used to know that you are supposed to appear before Parliament, he would prefer that you appear before Parliament before going to any other state functions, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, and we have agreed at the floor of this House before that two important functions of a cabinet secretary or executive is one is a cabinet meeting, and number two is appearing before Parliament. Mr. Speaker, this is a calculated evasion of not appearing before this House, Mr. Speaker. So I request, Mr. Speaker, in future, I don't know what Senate Business Committee where you chair, you need to provide guidance, Mr. Speaker. And I agree with what senators have said. Any minister who does not appear when required by this House, Mr. Speaker, should be fined heavily. And I'm happy that the Powers and Privileges Bill passed yesterday. One question goes with 5 million, Mr. Speaker, and they pay from their own source, Mr. Speaker. So looking at my questions, the CS should have paid around 20 million, which I know some of the CSs don't have problem with, because nowadays they have a lot of cash running around, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, second and finally is on the issue of gender. I find it expressed reservations. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with, although he has left, my colleague, is it deputy or minority leader, said, Mr. Speaker, that these CSS are busy answering us in matangas, in baby showers, in bridal showers, and birthday parties, Mr. Speaker, but they cannot come and answer. For me, I have always been answered in funerals, Mr. Speaker, which I find it out of place and obnoxious, Mr. Speaker. But when I give the CS of Rose a chance to come and answer these questions on behalf of the great people of Kenya and Nandi, they don't find it convenient. But if they hear this weekend there is a function, a social function of any nature, they will hire a chopper and fly and come and answer before the people, Mr. Speaker. So we should stop taking Kenyans for fools, Mr. Speaker. We cannot operate this way, Mr. Speaker. In fact, my advice to the CSS, they should reduce even going to social gatherings and use this premium platform, Mr. Speaker, where it is organized, you answer, you clarify, you table evidence. Instead of waiting for functions to happen during weekend, Mr. Speaker, or Arambes to come and give out money and bumboozle Kenyans, calaventing, perambulating, which does not help in any way, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the CS of gender, I am one believer that CS Aisha Jumwa is doing extremely well, but today I'm disappointed, Mr. Speaker, because when you were debating NADCO and you are the one who guided us, and I saw some people were trying to blame you yesterday, they don't know how wise you are. I beg to forgive them on your behalf, because they are trying to blame you on the issue of NADCO, Mr. Speaker. When the NADCO report was being presented, we were told there was a tactical, calculated move by the gender ministry that they were doing somewhere mysteriously to address the issue of a third gender rule. Mr. Speaker, I woke up on behalf of all women, girls, and many others, Mr. Speaker, to come and listen to this strategy that is being employed by gender to address a third gender rule, Mr. Speaker. And you can see the number of women senators in the Senate today is quite high, Mr. Speaker, because we really wanted to find out how do we resolve this thing that has been elusive since 1994 on achieving the third gender rule. But I want to assure the women leaders, women senators, and women of this country, there is hope, because the president himself believes in a third gender rule, Mr. Speaker. So even if the Speaker, and I want to agree with my colleagues, let the CS appear in the next 30 minutes, we can suspend the House, ensure wherever she is, because I'm aware, Mr. Speaker, there is no cabinet meeting today. So I am assured that there is no any other urgent thing that they can, Mr. Speaker. So why don't you suspend the House, order the CS to appear within 30 minutes, and also to come with a fine, Mr. Speaker, to ensure the senators are comfortable, so that when they are answering questions, Mr. Speaker, please, going into the future, let SBC guide us or become innovative. We are not guiding the ABC, you are the one guiding. Let us become innovative, Mr. Speaker. And I want to advise colleagues, let us, the issues of the plenary and the Senate remains here. When you want to make your comments in the press conferences and funerals and other things, please reserve it there. But don't discuss the conduct and functionality of the Speaker of the Senate. Other lower house will defend their own Speaker. Us will defend ours. So if you have a problem, please discuss it with your wife in your bedroom at night, but don't bring it out in the public. Mr. Speaker, I express strong reservations against non-appearances of CSS. I thank you.
Senator Eddy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I want to start by saying that, Mr. Speaker, on 30th of November, 2023, the Prime Cabinet Secretary was to appear in this House. And, Mr. Speaker, if you remember, he did not appear. And colleague and esteemed senators did pronounce themselves on the issue very strongly. But it appeared like it ended there. We did not take any action. And Mr. Speaker, I empathized with you because you even had today the whip, the majority whip, inviting us to the, inviting our attention to Standing Order number 51D, which, Mr. Speaker, says that the Senate may, where a cabinet secretary fails, without reasonable cause, and underline the word reasonable cause, to appear and respond to questions under this part, move a motion to censure the cabinet secretary. Now, I do understand that, Mr. Speaker, the requirement of this particular standing order is to the extent that the Speaker, being a neutral figure running the House, cannot initiate any action under that particular standing order. And therefore, it behooves my fellow colleague senators to actually take action. So what I would have wanted to see is perhaps Senator Mungatana or Senator Boni Aluale actually taking action and coming to this House and telling us, this is my motion to censor this particular CS for disrespecting this House and taking it forward. That's the way we should be moving as a Senate. And I wanted to protect you, Mr. Speaker. Now that you have protected us so many times this entire year, may I protect you on that? But then, I also wanted to observe that we as senators elected by the people are very reasonable people. That is why the word reasonable appears in that particular standing order. And therefore, we are not malicious. To the extent that if there is any CS that takes us seriously and takes us at our own estimate of the seriousness we bring in this country as a House, then they should be able to take us seriously. What do I mean by this, Mr. Speaker? I'm in possession of the 3 letters of the CSS who are supposed to be in this House today. And I will argue a case on which kind of CSS we should be able to censor and the ones that we should not be able to censor. Mr. Speaker, on 28th of February, 2024, the CS for transport, that is CS Kipchumba Murkomen, wrote a letter. And this letter, he did indicate, the title of it was, he was requesting for a rescheduling of appearance date before the Senate plenary. And his reasons were this. And, having accepted that he received a letter from this House dated 27th, meaning that he was responding on 28th, a day immediately after I received the letter from this Senate, he said that unfortunately the date the date of my scheduled appearance before the Senate coincides with a hearing in the matter of arbitration proceedings, that is the KU Railways Holding Limited versus the Republic of Kenya and the Republic of Uganda in London, which is an emerging issue that actually came. And Mr. Speaker, I'm privy to the fact that this particular letter was considered by SBC, and therefore the understanding was reached at with this particular CS. A reasonable house as the Senate wouldn't censor this kind of CS because he has been respectful, he has wrote his letter on time, and indeed responded in a record time to the extent that SBC did deliberate on it. I don't see a problem with this, Mr. Speaker. The second is actually CS Chris Kipto, Daktari mwenyewe. It's a PS. He responded to the request for him to appear before this house. And this reason also, I might invite the Senate to consider, which was, he will be out of country, that is the CS will be out of the country, attending the 56th session of the Economic Commission for Africa and Annual Conference of African Ministries on Finance, this date. And Mr. Speaker, sitting on finance and budget and knowing how much we are struggling as a country to create a debt management strategy, this is a very important thing that the CS has to attend. And what impresses me is that he responded on 29th, it came to SBC, it was indeed considered, and communications were made. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have CS, Honorable Aisha Jumwa. I am privy to the fact that her letter came yesterday when the Senate already had adjourned to go home. These colleague senators had to come here today in the morning, knowing very well that we are expecting this CS. Now listen to the content of this letter, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of writing this letter is to confirm I forwarded the responses to the statement sought by Senator Amida Kibwana on gender-based violence in Kenya's political space. Further, due to conflicting schedule, I will not be able to attend the meeting scheduled to take place on Wednesday. The other colleagues, CSS, have indicated that they will desire to be here. They are requesting for a rescheduling of the meeting. And these are CS who tell you, I will not attend that meeting on the day that you want me to attend. My responses, I've given them to whoever asked me. They are not even recognized that these people are actually people who are representing the larger population. And therefore, if you find that my responses are not adequate enough, you can consider calling me back to the Senate. Mr. Speaker, Chapter 10 of the Constitution talk about three very serious C's that we as a House must then try to deliberate on. Number one, it talks about a leader who holds public office to the magnitude that Honorable Aisha Jumwa holds, and even ourselves, must be a capable leader. Number two, must be a competent leader. And number three, must be a credible leader. All those C's are disputed by the content of this letter. This is the highest level of disrespect, not only to you as a speaker, but also to this House. So I hold the view that in response to the content of the letter that we have received from Honorable Aisha Jumwa, this House must then invite the content of Standing Order number 51. And a member of this House, and I want to wish the majority side the courage, especially the majority whip, that this afternoon, go draft a motion and bring into this House for the censorship of this particular minister. Because it's the highest level of disrespect. And I've shown you very clearly why the other two ministers, I will take their responses as a senator as first, reasonable, two, respectful of the time of our speaker, and respectful of the time of this honorable House, and more importantly, accountable to the people of Kenya. But this is completely unacceptable. And I think for us to send a message of why we did make the decision to actually come with these particular standing orders, this CS must be censored. And if the majority whip does not take the courage to draft that censorship motion, and then number 2, the Senator for Nandi does not follow with the courage to try and do that censor motion, Mr. Speaker, I will take the courage and come with that censor motion. So that as a House, we send a message to CSS that we are not here to waste our time. Mr. Speaker, we have got so many bills, and again, amazing bills. I've read the bill by the senator for, the good senator from Mombasa, Senator Miraj, who actually cares about gender issues more than what the CS has done here, in a place where violence is killing women in this country. And I need to be spending my time considering a motion, Mr. Speaker, a very good motion. And we have got so many other motions other bills that are very good in this House, that we need to be spending our time discussing the absence of CSS every single time. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I plead that this particular one needs a serious response from this House, and I hope that the majority side, led by the bullfighter, Senator Boni Aluale, will take action. But if they don't, then today or tomorrow, I will bring that motion, and I hope that the senators will reasonably find that motion very reasonable and very good for the people of Kenya and for this CSS. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Kinyua.
Asante Bwana Spika kunipa fursa hii niweze kuchangia. Kuanzia mwanzo nataka kukashifu hayo mazoea ya mawaziri wetu kuitwa hapa, ilhali tayari tukiangalia katika orodha ya mambo ya yale ambayo tulikuwa tunapanga kufanya katika bunge hili, tayari tulikuwa tumeanukuu na tunajipanga vilivyo kusudi tuweze kuyaangazia. Kwa hivyo inakashifu kitendo hicho. Lakini hata hivyo, Bwana Spika, ninataka kuungana na mwenzangu Senator Mungatana vile alivyosema ya kwamba ukiangalia katika kanuni zetu za kudumu 51D, Bwana Spika, ninaona kwamba tutakuwa tumetumia nguvu nyingi sana kwa yule waziri kusema ya kwamba yeye, nimesikia kulingana na wale wengi waliongea hapa, wanasema ndio waziri wa barabara alipeana sababu, waziri wa fedha ndio amepeana sababu, lakini waziri wa jinsia yeye achukuliwe hatua ambazo ni kali zaidi. Lakini Bwana Spika, nikiangalia ni vizuri vile ambavyo Senator Mungatana alivyosema ya kwamba katika SBC yetu tupange ya kwamba tukue na faini ambayo tutakayopiga waziri kabla hajachukua hili jukumu la kusema ya kwamba tunataka kumtimua, Bwana Spika. Na hata tukimpatia ile faini hata kama ni milioni 1, milioni 5 vile alivyopendekeza, Bwana Spika, hata ijapokuwa yule waziri hajafika katika jumba hili, ndio tuangalia kwamba amepeana sababu ambayo inafaa, kwa sababu pengine ameenda shughuli ambazo ni rasmi na hawezi kosa kwenda, kama nilivyokuwa nikimsikiza Senator Eddie akisema ya kwamba ndio yule waziri ama katibu wa kudumu amekwenda mahali ambapo kunafaa, na kwa sababu yako katika kamati ya fedha anasema ya kwamba ndio waziri hangeweza kuja. Kwa hivyo nataka kukubaliana na Mungatana tuwe na mfululizo mzuri, Bwana Spika, kwa sababu ndio leo amekosea. Na hata mimi nilipokuwa wakati ule mwingine waziri wa usalama nilimgoja hapa, nilikuwa nimejitayarisha kwa sababu watu wa Laikipia walikuwa na changamoto mambo ya usalama. Unapata vile vile kuna shida nyingi, watu wanapitia Elgeyo Marakwet na mahali kwingine, Bwana Spika, na Baringo. Tunauliza maswali hapa na waziri anasema hataweza kuja. Lakini Spika, sababu anayokupatia unaona ni sababu inayotosha zaidi, anakuambia kumetokea maafa Lamu na hangeweza kuja, na ukiangalia vizuri unaona hayo ni mambo ambayo ni ya dharura yalitokea. Kwa hivyo tunapaswa kuangalia. Nataka kukubaliana na Mungatana 100%. Kwa hivyo kuwa tukiangalia, kwa sababu ndio anaweza kuwa ana upendo na angetaka kuja. Lakini hata hivyo, Bwana Spika, tusiwe tukakejeliwa sisi kama seneti, kwa sababu tukifanya haya mazoea, Bwana Spika, tukubaliane na wao, itaonekana sisi, na wamekuwa wakiangalia hivyo. Leo tukubaliane, tuseme ya kwamba ndio Kipchumba Murkomen waziri wetu asije, yule mwingine asije. Kama mawaziri hawatakuwa akija, Bwana Spika, tuondoe katika kanuni zetu za kudumu. Hatutaki mawaziri wawe wakija hapa, tukutane nao katika mazishi, tuulizie maswali kwa mazishi, ama katika kamati zetu vile ambavyo tulikuwa tukifanya. Kwa hivyo, Bwana Spika, nakubaliana na wale walioongea, lakini nikimuuliza Eddie kwa unyenyekevu mwingi, nikimuuliza kiongozi kiranja wetu Boni Halwale, waziri wetu ambaye ni waziri wa jinsia, kwa leo, Bwana Spika, kwa leo tusilete ule mswada wa kumtimua, lakini tuseme ya kwamba aambiwe amefanya makosa, Bwana Spika. Na vile vile nimewasikia, Bwana Spika, wengine wakikurai uandike barua ama utoe hukumu ya kusema ya kwamba dakika 30 waweze kuwa amefika hapa. Bwana Spika, ningekurai tu kwa leo tukubaliane, uambie kosa limetendeka na utoe msimamo mkali, Bwana Spika, lakini kwenda mbele, Bwana Spika, tusimame wima kama nyumba ya Seneti, tusije tukadharauliwa na kukejeliwa. Bwana Spika, nataka kushutumu kitendo kilichotendeka na nasema asanti kwa wewe kunipa fursa hii.
Senator Miraj.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kuweza kunipa fursa hii, na mimi nitoe hisia zangu kutokamana na kutofika kwa mawaziri wetu katika kikao chetu cha leo asubuhi. Kwa hakika ni jambo la kutamausha na la kukasirisha na kughadhabisha, kwa sababu tumerauka, tumewacha vitanda vyetu ili tuweze kupata mwelekeo wa yale maswali ibuka, na sisi wengine ambao hatukuweza kupendekeza maswali tuweze kupeana maswali juu ya maswali ambayo tayari yalikuwa yameulizwa. Na mimi leo niseme kwamba sitakubaliana na maseneta wenzangu, kwa sababu mawaziri ambao hawakuweza kufika hapa ni mawaziri watatu, lakini kidole cha lawama kimenyoshewa tu waziri ambaye anatokea katika mkoa wa Pwani. Bwana Spika, ni jambo la kutamausha kuona ya kwamba sisi watu wa Pwani, haswa viongozi, huwa tunaangaliwa tu kama njia moja ya kuweza kufutia miguu mambo yote. Ni mara kadha mawaziri wamekuwa wakiitwa hapa na hawafiki, lakini sioni ni kwa nini kila mtu anamnyoshia kidole cha lawama dadangu kiongozi ambaye anatoka katika mkoa wa Pwani. Kwani yeye si binadamu ama si kiongozi ambaye anaweza kufika na dharura?
What is the point of order, Senator Mandago? Senator Miraj's yield. What is the point of order, Senator Mandago?
Mheshimiwa Spika, ni haki Senator Miraji kudai kwamba wapwani wanaangaliwa kwa
Senator Mandago, ni kanuni gani ya kudumu ambayo unataka kuitumia katika hoja hii?
Statement of facts.
Na
105.
Ujue kwamba ukichagua kuzungumza lugha ya Kiswahili itabidi uendelee.
Mheshimiwa Spika, wewe ndio umenichanganya. Ni haki Senator Miraj kudai ya kuwa watu wa Pwani wanaangaliliwa, wanaonewa kwa njia ya kufutia miguu, ili hali katika serikali hii, Mheshimiwa Spika, wewe mwenyewe ni Spika ya Seneti ambaye ni chumba ambaye ni hapa house katika bunge. Waziri Aisha Juma, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni baadhi ya wale wa mama wachache wameteuliwa kwa hii serikali. Mheshimiwa Spika, Senator Miraj mwenyewe amenominatiwa kuwa kwenye hii bunge. Mheshimiwa Spika, atoe utafiti.
Senator Mandago, tafadhali tumia Kiswahili sanifu siku nyingine. Hakuna kitu kama nominatiwa, ameteuliwa.
Ameteuliwa, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hivyo, je, ni haki Senator Miraj kudai haya madai ambayo ameweka kwenye chumba hii ya Seneti?
Senator Miraj.
Bwana Spika, yangu
kuna hoja nidhamu nyingine hapa, Senator Miraj.
Mr. Speaker, I rise under Constitution Article 152 4A, because there is assertion that Senator Miraj has stated that the reason Mheshimiwa Honorable Aisha Jumwa CS, she's being targeted because she comes from Coast, is very unfortunate statement, because according to Article 152(4)(a), each person appointed as a cabinet secretary A assumes office by swearing or affirming faithfulness to the people and the Republic of Kenya, and obedience to this Constitution before the President and in accordance with the third schedule as provided by the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. Is it in order for my good sister, Senator Miraj Abdullahi, to assert and state that, Mr. Speaker, that the reason CS Aisha Jumwa is being targeted because she comes from Coast? I think, Mr. Speaker, the President appointed Aisha Jumwa out of competency and meritocracy. It was not because she comes from Coast. It is because we believe that she would perform as a cabinet secretary. Mr. Speaker, can she withdraw, because it will not look very good in our answer and also before the eyes of Kenyans, because we don't want to see any CSs through the eyes of regions or tribe or ethnicity or religion they come from, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Miraj, certainly your statement is out of order. In fact, it goes to impute improper motive on your colleagues, that the reason why they are raising their concerns, why the minister is not present, is solely because she's from the Coast. Kindly proceed to withdraw that.
Asante Bwana Spika, labda Kiswahili changu ndo kimewakanganya. Wacha niendelee tafadhali Bwana Spika, nilinde.
I have made a ruling.
Ndio nasema natoa kauli hiyo na naomba msamaha ikiwa hivyo ndio nilivyoeleweka.
Endelea na
nikiendelea katika kutoa hisia zangu ni kwamba Bwana Spika, mawaziri wote wameandika barua, na kweli nakubaliana na bunge hili kwamba Waziri Aisha ameandika barua kuchelewa. Lakini katika kauli za maseneta wenzangu walipokuwa wamesimama kuzungumzia kutamaushwa kwao, hakuna hata mmoja ambaye amekupa wewe rai ya kuweza kumtafuta waziri na kumuuliza ni kitu gani haswa ambacho kimemfanya yeye asiweze kufika leo hapa. Wameweza kuwaelewa mawaziri wengine na wakakubali zile changamoto ambazo wamesema wako nazo, lakini kwa nini iwe ni waziri Aisha peke yake? Na ni mawaziri watatu ambao sote tumerauka ili kuja kuuliza maswali. Na maswala ya jinsia waziri ni maswala ya kila mtu, si maswala ya jinsia ya kike peke yake. Kweli tulitamaushwa na yale yaliyoendelea katika ripoti ya NADCO, lakini ilibainika wazi ya kwamba viongozi wa kike tulikwenda kupitia majopo tofauti na tukapeana hisia zetu, lakini komiti ya NADCO wenyewe waliamua kwamba watawachia majukumu hayo wizara na ile kamati ambayo aliibuni ili waweze kupea mwelekeo sahihi ambao wanautaka. Kwa hivyo nataka kusema katika bunge hili la Seneti ya kwamba waziri Aisha Jumwa hakuna mkono wowote ama lengo lolote la kuweza kuondoa azma ya wanawake kuwafikia jinsia ya theluthi mbili katika katiba yetu ya Kenya. Na ningependa pia
Senator Miraj, later the Honorable CS, when she appears, to be able to shed light on that subject, because we are not here to defend any CS, and the information you're giving, it's better given by the CS herself when she appears next. Have you concluded your remarks? Thank you, Senator Miraj. Senator Wafula.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa nafasi hii. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni jambo la kutamausha sana sisi kama maseneta kurauka asubuhi na mapema, wengine kupuzilia mbali staftahi, ili tuje tujadili mambo muhimu ya serikali na nchi ya Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, baadhi ya mawaziri ambao wamealikwa hapa ni lazima wajue kwamba kuja kwao hapa kutapeana mwelekeo na suluhisho ama kupeana matumaini kwa Wakenya. Mheshimiwa Rais amekuwa na zuru pembe mbalimbali za nchi ya Kenya akiahidi na kupeana mwelekeo kwa miradi ya maendeleo kwa Wakenya. Na miradi hii ambayo yeye hupeana mwelekeo kwayo, wale ambao lazima watekeleze ni mawaziri ambao wachache wao wamealikwa hapa na wamefeli kufika hapa. Waziri wa barabara na uchukuzi anajua fika jinsi Mheshimiwa Rais na viongozi kwa mfano wa mkoa Magharibi hususan Bungoma tumekuwa tunadai na kuitisha uwepo wake mashinani, ajione na aelewe ni sababu zipi zinashinikiza sisi kudai miradi ya maendeleo na barabara. Barabara ya Msikoma kwenda Mungazi, barabara kutoka Kakamega kuja Msikoma, barabara kutoka Chwele kwenda Lwahaha. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni lazima waziri huyu amke kutoka usingizi wa pono, atembee wima na ajue Kenya tunalipa ushuru. Hatuta ngoja Mheshimiwa Rais azuru atuahidi peupe mchana na waziri amejifunga kwenye mahandaki akipora na kufurahia jasho la Wakenya. Juzi nimeuliza maswali hapa Mheshimiwa Spika kuhusiana na mimba za mapema.
What is the point of order, Senator Mandaka?
Honorable Speaker, is it in order for the
Have a seat, Senator Ofuli, please.
Understanding on 105, Honorable Speaker, is it in order for the Senator for Bungoma to allege that the Honorable Cabinet Secretary for Roads is stealing and enjoying public resources in his office? Does he have evidence, Honorable Speaker?
Senator Wafula, you certainly need to substantiate that allegation, failure of which you may have to withdraw and apologize.
Naomba kuondoa hoja hiyo na kushinikiza Mheshimiwa Spika kwamba iwapo mfanyikazi ama waziri analipwa mshahara, anaendeshwa kwa magari ya kifahari, anatibiwa kwa pesa za mtoza ushuru, ili hali anayelipa ushuru hamuoni mtumishi wa umma popote katika kaunti hiyo, na mtumishi huyu hajalalamika kwamba analishwa na kuvishwa na kuendeshwa vizuri, bila shaka Mheshimiwa Spika anafurahia jasho la Wakenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, waziri wa jinsia, niliuliza maswali kuhusiana na mimba za mapema katika kaunti ya Bungoma kwa sababu ya upungufu wa sodo, upungufu wa fedha za kuimarisha biashara za kina mama na wajane. Waziri huyu mpaka leo ameweka nta kwenye masikio na kinywa chake amekifunga kabisa. Tunajiuliza haya maswali kwa sababu alichaguliwa kwa mrengo wa Kenya Kwanza, na ni lazima adhihirishe uwezo wake wa kuchapa kazi kwa kutembea pembe zote na kujadili masuala haya na wananchi wa Kenya. Na haya maswali Mheshimiwa Spika, yeye na waziri wa elimu lazima watembee pamoja kusuluhisha masuala ya mimba za mapema na masuala ya wanawake na watoto katika taasisi za elimu katika nchi ya Kenya. Sasa kile tunasema sio kwamba tunaomba tafadhali waje, lazima waje. Na mimi niko tayari kujiunga na maseneta wengine kwamba kila mtu lazima wajibike. Mtoza ushuru anatoa jasho na kusaga meno kwa pesa anazotoa. Serikali inalazimisha watu walipe ushuru. Wale wanaochukua ushuru wanafurahi na kutupigia makofi kwa kulipa ushuru, lakini tunapouliza uwajibikaji wanatugeuka sisi, wanasema hatuwaheshimu na hatuwapi nafasi. Mimi nasema kwa niaba ya watu wa Bungoma kwamba nitadai haki kwa watu wa Bungoma, nitadai haki kwa Wakenya, ili serikali niliyoipigania na ninayoipigania ipate sifa na ishukuriwe kwa jasho na kwa kazi wanayofanya. Mheshimiwa Spika, mawaziri hawa lazima waje. Asante na nashukuru.
Senator Mundigi.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa ruhusa niweze kuchangia mambo ya mbaye ya mawaziri wataki kufanya kazi kulingana na vile tulipitisha. Nataka nikumbushe mawaziri wote, wakati Bwana Spika tulikuwa nang'ang'ana vile tutakuwa tukiwatarajia katika kikao hiki, kulikuwa nifute kwa Azimio na serikali ya Kenya Kwanza, lakini hapo tukaweza kuwa tuliweza kusucceed na tutakuwa tunawaita, na sasa kwa kikao hiki tuo kitu kimoja, hakuna mgawanyiko. Nataka kusema ametukosea aswa, mimi nikiwa ni senator wa Embu County, ambaye siku ya leo ni siku kubwa katika Embu County, ambaye governor wa Embu County mchapakazi amejikakamua na kuongea na wale wafanyikazi ambaye ni wa county, anaenda kwa kikao ya parliament ya Embu kuambia vile amefanya kazi kwa kipindi ya mwaka mmoja. Na sasa ni aibu kubwa sana kama mimi sijahudhuria pale, kwa sababu najua kwa hili kikao inafaa ni governor na senator vile kazi imefanyika. Kwa hiyo nataka kuambia waziri wa barabara na usukuzi amefanya mambo ambaye si mazuri, kwa sababu watu wa Embu County kutoka Makutano kwenda Mwea kwenda Embu Tharaka Nithi mpaka Meru wanataka kujua barabara itapanuliwa namna gani iwe kama zile zingine, kwa sababu kama kuna county imetengwa ni county ya Embu. Ya pili, watu wa Embu County walikuwa wameniambia nisikanyange pale mpaka nikuja hapa niulize Murkomen uwanja ya ndege atatujengea lini, kwa sababu watu wa Embu wamekubali kulima, tunalima miraa, na unaona mambo ya barabara imeleta shinda, imekuwa ni mambo ya ajali, na wamekubali waweza kujengewa kiwanja ndio tuweze kupeleka miraa yetu huko ng'ambo, ndio tuwe na pesa ambaye ni pesa mkononi na mambo ya sile vitu zingine. Pia walikuwa amenituma nikikuja leo niseme kutoka Karaba kwenda Makema na kwenda Machanga, hiyo vile parapara vile itatengenezwa iwekwe lami, na pia kutoka Kiritire kwenda Karie na kwenda Kiambere, kwenda huko Kiambere huko bahari stima inatoka vile itawekwa lami, na pia mpaka kwenda upande zingine. Kwa hiyo parapara
waziri hayuko kusikia hayo yote malalamishi.
Spika angekuja, hiyo ni maswali yalikuwa yametumwa na watu wa Embu ni waulize.
Sasa hayuko.
Na hiyo, na kama hayuko lakini amekosea watu wa Embu County. Embu County ni sub county ine, tungemuuliza hiyo maswali kwa sababu tunataka miaka ambayo inakuja Embu iwe inatembea vizuri. Ya pili ni waziri wa fedha. Waziri wa fedha amekosea aswa. Sisi ni wakubwa yake katika kikao hiki ya Senate. Unajua Bwana Spika, nilikuwa nimejiandaa kumuuliza miezi tatu ambaye Senate wafanyikazi wa drivers na security hawajalipwa pesa, na alilipa wafanyikazi wa bunge. Na pia unajua hii, kama unjua Bwana Spika, ni miezi 3 maofisi yetu haijalipwa pesa na waziri wa fedha. Hiyo ingine nilikuwa nataka nimuulize, kwa kipindi ya miaka mingi walimu walikuwa na sinda, na mpaka saa hii tulienda tukafanya operesi sisi maseneta, tukaona mtu akistahavu akiwa miaka 60, ile swali ningemuuliza anakuwa barua anapata haraka, lakini unakuta tumefuatilia tulesa iko na sinda. Kwa hivyo hiyo ni maswali ningemuuliza. Kwa hivyo mimi naunga mkono vile hao watu watashukuru hatua, lakini mambo ya kuatimua siko hapo. Serikali ya Kenya Kwanza haisemi mambo ya kutimuana, ni mambo ya kusemesana, ndio tuweze kuona vile serikali ya Kenya Kwanza itafanya kazi. Asante Bwana Spika.
Senator Cheptumo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also arise to add my voice to what is being discussed. Mr. Speaker, Article 124 of our Constitution mandates this House in the National Assembly to establish committees and make standing orders for the orderly conduct of the proceedings of the House. Mr. Speaker, therefore, our standing orders has the full force of the Constitution of Kenya. So that, Mr. Speaker, the provisions of Standing Order 51 all the way to 51D has the full force of this Constitution. Mr. Speaker, This is the assembly of the national leaders of our country, elected, nominated to deal with matters of concern to our counties and the county governments. And how do we do so, Mr. Speaker? We do so through the various structures in place, including asking questions to the CSS. Mr. Speaker, it is important for us to realize that the institution that sought this House to amend the standing orders, Mr. Speaker, is the President himself, who requested both National Assembly and Senate to amend the standing orders so that the CSS are able to appear and answer questions of concern to our electorate, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is paining and disappointing, Mr. Speaker, that when the time and the date is scheduled for our cabinet to appear, they don't. And Mr. Speaker, I want to agree perhaps that there are situations where they write to you as our Speaker, giving justifiable reasons why they should not appear. Mr. Speaker, it is indeed acceptable that our CS should be able to, in good time, be able to address the House why they are unable to appear. But, Mr. Speaker, my concern is that the trend is continuing to avail. So that, Mr. Speaker, my worry is that in some few, as we proceed, this avenue of these senators being able to use to deal with matters of concern to their counties is going, Mr. Speaker, to diminish. Mr. Speaker, that particular standing order 51D or non-attendance of cabinet secretaries, Mr. Speaker, the only punishment provided for there is to censure. And that is what Senator Ocheng was raising. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with the proposal that we might have to enhance, apart from censoring a cabinet secretary, Mr. Speaker, let us enhance the punishment. And Mr. Speaker, when governors don't appear before committees of this House, Mr. Speaker, you know what they always do. They are supposed to pay a fine of 500,000, if I'm not wrong, Mr. Speaker. So it is important for this House, Mr. Speaker, to assert its authority on this position, so that a fine of an amount that can be agreed by this House should be put in our standing order number 51D, Mr. Speaker, in addition to the provision of moving a censor motion and to censor cabinet secretary. Mr. Speaker, Baringo, for example, the county I come from, and in all the other counties, Mr. Speaker, we are facing a lot of challenges. And Mr. Speaker, I can testify before the House that the questions we ask these CSS when they come here, Mr. Speaker, our people are keenly following, Mr. Speaker. And I am aware, even in my county, Mr. Speaker, sometimes the questions are asked here. When I go to the county, the members of the public are able to say, yes, we saw you, we heard you asking this question. So, Mr. Speaker, the value addition to our representation, the value addition to the citizen of our country, Mr. Speaker, through this procedure of cabinet ministers appearing before us, Mr. Speaker, is really, really important. And so, Mr. Speaker, I think my concern mainly is, so what from today? What happens tomorrow? I think, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank you because, Mr. Speaker, I have listened to you issuing statements compelling and telling the cabinet secretaries to appear before the House. I think you have been very clear, and even the other House has been very clear. But I think what will make the CSS, Mr. Speaker, to appear here is when we enhance the fine from this censure motion proposed by Article Standing Order 51D to a situation where they can pay fines. Mr. Speaker, we have the capacity, we have the means, we have, Mr. Speaker, the opportunity as a House to implement this. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to join my colleagues and say that it is important that you assert your authority as our Speaker and as a House, so that, Mr. Speaker, we have a solution to this situation, which is not enabling us to represent our people well, Mr. Speaker. So I join my colleagues in supporting that position.
Senator Mandago.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute in this. Honorable Speaker, first I want to join my colleagues in saying it is not in order for Cabinet Secretaries to absent themselves from answering questions in this House. Honorable Speaker, the purpose of this session was to make sure that the general public of the Republic of Kenya are able to get direct answers to their issues from the people responsible at the policy level, at the national government and at the county level, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, when Cabinet Secretaries fail to attend these sessions, they not only fail the Senate and Parliament, Honorable Speaker, but they also fail the people of Kenya. That notwithstanding, Honorable Speaker, this amendment that we brought to this House to allow Cabinet Secretaries to appear before us, Honorable Speaker, was a position that was developed by the Kenya Kwanza administration, led by our party leader, who is now the President of the Republic of Kenya, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, when Cabinet Secretaries fail to appear before this House, they are not only failing Parliament, but they are also insubordinating the appointing authority, Honorable Speaker, because this was the position of the Kenya Kwanza administration, that the answers to the public can no longer be passed through many channels, but should come directly from the holders of the office, so that the citizens can directly get from them. This would enable the people of Kenya, Honorable Speaker, when Cabinet Secretaries visit various parts of this country, to be able to refer them to the question and answers they give. Honorable Speaker, this is a vision of Cabinet Secretaries from appearing, not only in this session, Honorable Speaker, but even before committees of Parliament, must be firmly dealt with, and I concur with my colleagues that we must invoke the necessary powers of this House to make sure the attendance is observed. Honorable Speaker, for the Cabinet Secretary for Gender, Honorable Speaker, this House was very expectant to address the matter of gender parity in government and also in Parliament, Honorable Speaker. This is a matter that has been canvassed in this country for over 30 years. There was only one opportunity available through NATCOM, Honorable Speaker, that this matter was going to be settled once and for all. I was eager myself to ask the Cabinet Secretary, who removed the gender agenda from the NATCOM menu, Honorable Speaker, so that women leaders in this country should also not be going around saying we are fighting for women's rights, we are representing women, but the very women are undermining the success of the women. No wonder, Honorable Speaker, the old adage says the enemy of women is actually women. And therefore, failing to appear before this House, the Cabinet Secretary for Gender has actually failed the women of this country, because this was the opportunity for her to explain what our ministry is doing in order to make sure that that agenda is kept alive and that matter is settled once and for all, because we have an administration that is keen to ensure women are involved in leadership and decision-making position in this country, Honorable Speaker. Finally, Honorable Speaker, as a House, I want to agree with my colleagues and even be persuaded further that the fines for non-appearance should be enhanced. Honorable Sotsi, Honorable Speaker, had proposed an amendment of increasing the fine to 2 million. I am now persuaded that it should even go to 5 million. This kind of contempt can only be met with a harsher punishment, Honorable Speaker. I support.
No, Honorable Onyonka Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to actually reiterate what my colleague, Senator from Senator Mandago, what he has been raising, the issue he has raised. Mr. Speaker, if you remember in 2008 or 9, during that time I was at the National Assembly with you. And you remember when cabinet ministers, even Honorable Boni Halwale was there, and I remember Honorable Mungatana was there. Mr. Speaker, anybody who assumes that when a cabinet minister comes to make a presentation on a national matter, that maybe that minister could be wasting his time, or we who are going to listen to the contributions and discussions are actually wasting our time, is wrong. Mr. Speaker, the first thing is that the Kenyan public is interested in listening and hearing how the ministers are going to articulate government policy. Then they will be answering those questions which are critical, because running a country, Mr. Speaker, frequent times you'll have crises, you'll have matters pertaining to emergencies and all that. And then sometimes, Mr. Speaker, that is the reason I wish many of the cabinet members in the KK government would understand that them coming and answering this question, first, they continue with the historical precedent. And number two, the public is very curious and always constantly listening to what we say and what we articulate in terms of trying to solve the issues that affect our country. Mr. Speaker, I really hope that the CSS will take this House seriously, that they will in fact be, if need be, I plead that with my leader, Honorable Cherargei, and the whip, Honorable Halwale, to make a phone call to the president and tell him his ministers are misbehaving. They are letting your government down. Because we come here not because, Mr. Speaker, we are on holiday. We are dealing with matters of national importance. And when a cabinet minister comes, like the other day when Honorable Rinturi came, Mr. Minister, I was very happy because you could see he's seized of the matters, he's discussing these matters intelligently, he's coming in with some solutions. That's what we are looking for in our country, Mr. Speaker. We are not looking for drama and things which are irrelevant. And that's why I'm really pleading with the CSS and the state officers who are being asked to come and attend these meetings. Because, Mr. Speaker, if you look at our committees, the CS Finance, the Controller Budget, the Auditor General, they are always coming. When we ask them to come, they come. And their record is extremely good. Why is it that the cabinet members of His Excellency William Ruto's government abdicating their responsibility? And Mr. Speaker, I also want to plead through you and my colleagues who have access to His Excellency the President, tell him that many of these ministers are actually just randa-randaing, doing nothing. They are going on trips. Let them leave those things. Kenya has issues. Let them settle down on the ground. Let them intervene. Let them come to our counties. Mr. Speaker, I have not seen a single CS in Kisii since I became a senator, except Moses Kuria. And yet, previously, the CSS need to move around the country. They need to come and see what is going on.
What is the point of order, Senator Munyihaji?
He's my brother, Senator Onyonka, from the great county of Kisii, in order to say that he has never seen any CS in Kisii, yet CS Machoge comes from Kisii.
Mr. Speaker, I actually wanted to re-emphasize the point. I have actually not even seen Honorable Machogu. Yes, he's in Meru, he's in Murang'a, Tharaka-Nithi, he's going to Kwale, and it's the responsibility of the office. With Honorable Machogu, I wouldn't even raise a query about it for the simple reason that he's running all over, and I see what he's doing in terms of going to the different ministries, different schools and different institutions. I think the portfolio, that is a ministry, my leader, Mr. Speaker, that I would have wished that it had a deputy minister.
because the Minister of Education is too busy. The minister is all over the place. I don't think he's really having his hands on the cake, as they say. But that is a discussion for the other day. I would like to finish, Mr. Speaker, by saying that let the cabinet ministers in the government today realize that they need to do much more, that our expectations are much more, that we know many of them are qualified and many of them can do a good job. But we also know that others are very lazy, Mr. Speaker. So I would like to reiterate what Honorable Mandago has said. That fine that Honorable Sosi has brought, we need to make an amendment. Let's change that thing to 5 million, Honorable Halwale, so that it acts as a deterrence. So that even if, Mr. Speaker, if a minister under CS knows that he's not going to be around and he has gone for official duty, it is automatic. He should write a letter which is acceptable, because we are not idiots. We know that the cabinet minister is traveled somewhere on official business, and it is important that we empathize on that. But this narrative where people just assume that, I hear this, Honorable Halwale, Mr. Speaker, frequently. Oh, the Senate is nyumba ya wazee, hakuna kitu mnafanya, there's nothing you do there. No, this house is serious. And let these ministers realize we'll be very serious with them. Because other than them giving an apology, we are going to start fining people, we are going to start censoring people, and you know many of them, Mr. Speaker, don't know that under Chapter 6, if somebody comes here and we censor them and ask and say that they cannot hold public office, there's nothing they'll do. The president is the only one who's going to sympathize with them. But if the president realizes that this guy is lazy, why would he save him? He just fires him, brings another one who can perform. With those very few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support and let this house be treated with respect and decorum. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, he's already concluded and taken his seat, Senator Kathuri. Honorable Senators, let us end this matter. He's already yielded, so the information certainly is. So, Honorable Senators, I have had your compelling contributions as far as the failure of CSS to attend Senate session for purposes of responding to questions. Now, these compelling contributions that you've made, they would have been relevant if they're made within the context of a motion of censure. In the absence of a motion of censure, what honorable senators are doing is merely to lament. We cannot be reduced to a house of lamentations. This is not the first senators are lamenting. This may not be the last senators will lament. You need to stop lamenting and take it to the next level. And honorable senators, the next course of action is provided for under our own standing orders. If you read Standing Order 51D, it gives the option available to this House where the House feels that a CS has abstained themselves without reasonable cause. Otherwise, for how long are you going to vent your frustrations like you've done today? We have taken 2.5 hours venting our frustrations, our pain, our disgust, our disappointment. Next week on Tuesday, if CSS don't appear, we'll continue playing the tape. The other following Tuesday, if they don't appear, you will continue playing the tape. Honorable senators, that must stop. You have the sword. The sword is not with the speaker. You have the sword under Standing Order 51D. You can elect to continue lamenting, or you can draw the sword and strike. It's up to you. Let us end it there. Next order.
Order number 8, motion. Declaration of cattle rustling and banditry as a national disaster and establishment of a special fund for victims. Resumption of debate.
Senator Cheptumo, just approach the chair, please. This is a resumption of debate that was interrupted on Wednesday, the 28th of February, 2024. At that juncture, Senator Ledama Olekina was making his contribution in form of seconding. He had a balance of 13 minutes. He is not in the House, so I will allow Senator Fatuma Dulo to take it from there.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me make my contribution to this motion on the declaration of cattle rustling and banditry as a national disaster and establishment of a special fund for victims. Mr. Speaker, I wish to support this motion because this is long overdue. Because of the menace that we have in the country as a result of cattle rustling, which has changed from the previous thinking that it was a cultural behavior among some certain pastoral communities. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the cattle rustling issues that are affecting many parts of this country, and I must appreciate the effort put in by the current CS Interior, CS Kithure Kindiki, in trying to stamp out the issue of cattle rustling in some areas. But I believe this is something that is continuing even with the kind of effort the government is putting in. And I believe the proposal by Senator Cheptumo that we must create a special fund is also valid, and also the proposal in declaring cattle rustling as a national disaster is also valid and very important. Mr. Speaker, if I may give an example of Isiolo County, you will see that the pattern has changed from cultural behavior to business. Because you can imagine animals actually taken today, within few hours, they find themselves in the market, which means it's a business now, the issue of cattle rustling. And I believe the government should be able to put in more effort in actually getting rid of cattle rustling, because you will find that still we have the issues of proliferation of small arms and weapons in our country. Most of the areas within where cattle rustling is happening, you will find that many people are having firearms that are not even licensed. We have made efforts as a country to make sure that all those who own firearms, they have licensed them. But unfortunately, still people have those firearms unlicensed. And there is government presence all over, even at the location level and sub-location levels in so many areas, which clearly means, Mr. Speaker, that there is a lot of laxity as far as dealing with cattle rustling in this country is important. And I think we have to be serious this time round and make sure that these issues are dealt with. Cattle rustling, Mr. Speaker, has affected also the social fabric within our communities. You will find, Mr. Speaker, that in many areas, the situation on the ground is affected. Communities' lives are affected. You will find that there is economic hardship, Mr. Speaker, where you can imagine some families, they have over 1,000 animals. Within a day, it's all swept away without any recourse. I believe this is really a very serious matter because the issue of pastoralism and keeping animals, it's way of life and livelihood for so many people. But unfortunately, that has never happened in our country, where we feel that serious effort is put into place to make sure that the issue of cattle rustling is dealt with. Mr. Speaker, you will find that in the areas where cattle rustling is happening, there is no development at all. Because if there is a project coming up in a certain area, people will say, oh, there is insecurity there. That is the reason why we have not even completed the projects that are proposed in those areas. And I have several examples within even my own county. The areas that border Wajir, Garissa, Samburu, those areas, Mr. Speaker, and even between Isiolo and Meru, where developments are affected simply because of cattle rustling and insecurity. And that is something that actually takes people backward and brings in the issue of marginalization in this country. And we must take, Mr. Speaker, this very serious. Mr. Speaker, unemployment is also another factor that is affecting most of our youths in our country. Because you can find in a place like Isiolo, the only employment that some people can access is actually herding animals. But now, when these animals are taken away, you will find even a boy or a girl with an A, they are unable even to go to university. And if the only source of livelihood that are animals, they are taken away, and that is where they are actually getting their employment in herding, then it means these youths are actually reduced to nothing, Mr. Speaker. And this matter has to be taken very seriously. In payment of school fees, you will find that most of the pastoralists, they rely on these animals to pay their school fees for their children. Mr. Speaker, if these animals are taken away, most of our kids end up actually not even finishing their school or their schools or even getting to school because cattle rustling is affecting our communities so much. Mr. Speaker, this is actually a matter that this country has to take very seriously. And I believe the proposal of a special fund will actually mitigate some of the factors or the challenges we get as a result of cattle rustling. Because if you have 1,000 camels and they are taken away, if there is funding or a fund that is somewhere, they can be compensated, Mr. Speaker. But without fund, that means Kenyans are really suffering, especially in those areas where cattle rustling is prone. Mr. Speaker, I believe we have a solution to this problem, if only as a country we are serious. Even in budgeting process, you will see that there is serious action put into agriculture. But cattle rustling, very minimal. Because if you look at the fertilizer input, where billions are put into fertilizer actually purchase, what happens to pastoral communities? Nobody is talking about even this particular, establishing a fund that has been proposed by the Senator for Baringo. Mr. Speaker, we should have equal actually support from government. If agriculture is given 2 billion, livestock should also be given 2 billion in establishing, for example, like fund or even restocking that we have discussed in various fora in this country. Mr. Speaker, I believe the effort put in by government is a short-term measure that helps the communities, but we need a serious action where issues of cattle rustling that has been resolved, because this is a matter that is happening in most of our counties in daily basis. You can imagine we have actually tried even to bring in NPR to complement the regular police, but this is not helping at all. You see, you will find that the people who are dealing with cattle rustling, they have sophisticated firearms that are actually, even our own regular security are scared of even following up those animals when cattle rustling is taking place. Mr. Speaker, I do support this motion because it's going to give us a solution to the current cattle rustling that we have in our country, because we have tried several measures that are not actually assisting our communities. National disaster, of course, we have tried that also in issues of drought, but still we have challenges. And I think as a country, we have to focus in helping the source of livelihood for our people, because poverty level in so many areas where cattle rustling is happening is taking place. Because if you have 500 cows, they are taken away today, you end up getting nothing. Drought is actually killing our animals. Cattle rustling is taking away the animals also. So where are we going to go as pastoralist communities? This is a challenge that we need to seriously put our heads together and get up a solution for it, because unless we do that, the many challenges we have in our country, counties and the country are not going to be solved. Mr. Speaker, you will find that, in fact, in many of these areas, the issues of drugs are cropping in because animals are taken away and the people end up doing nothing. Especially in areas like Isiolo, you will find youths getting into drugs, Mr. Speaker. They end up doing nothing, and some of them, if they don't get employment and they see that cattle rustling is happening in certain areas, of course they will say, why not? Mr. Speaker, I'll stop here in support of the motion and believe that whatever we are going to propose as far as this motion is concerned, we should cascade it down so that we can be able to deal with the issues of cattle rustling in our country and also in our counties, because it's a real national disaster in our country. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Fatuma Nduro, you are to second the motion so that we can open it.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I do second. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Senators, I propose the question that aware that cattle rustling ban concerned that the menace has since left irreparable and negative socioeconomic impact, which include but are not limited to increased number of widows, widowers, orphan children, poverty, displacement of people, leading to internally displaced persons, NDPs, disruption of education, health programs, and other economic activities owing to the destruction and or closure of educational, health, and other institutions. Further, concerned that the people living in the affected regions have been denied the enjoyment of their socio-economic and political rights as guaranteed to them under the Bill of Rights as enshrined in Chapter 4 of the Constitution. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the national government, through the Ministry of Interior and National Administration, in collaboration with the Council of Governors, 1, declares cattle rustling a national disaster. 2, establish a national task force on cattle rustling or banditry. to 1, investigate the causes of the rampant cattle rustling and banditry in the Seni region and the country at large. And 2, establishes the extent of suffering, loss, and damage the cattle rustling or banditry has occasioned to the communities in all the affected counties. And 3, create a special fund for mitigating the losses suffered by and in compensating all victims of cattle rustling or banditry, and set through all internally displaced persons occasioned by the menace. Senator Chalagay Samson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this opportunity. Mine is to support this motion that was brought by Senator William Cheptumo, the Senator of the great people of Baringo. Mr. Speaker, we have waited for this motion because of the current occurrence. I know in Samburu the other day, an MCA had been killed, and even in Baringo itself, Mr. Speaker. But I want to put it to the nation that this issue of cattle rustling is not only in North Rift and South Rift alone, Mr. Speaker. This issue of cattle rustling and banditry affects over 7 counties. And let me state them so that for the record and Kenyans to understand, so that it does not appear we are discussing issue of either only Samburu or Baringo. Mr. Speaker, it affects 7 counties. That's a population of 8.8 million Kenyans are affected by this menace of insecurity through cattle rustling and banditry. And that is Baringo, Elgeyo Marakwet County, Turkana County, Isiolo County, Marsabit County, Laikipia County, and finally West Pokot County, Mr. Speaker. So this is like a half of the country, Mr. Speaker. So this is a national disaster in its form and design, Mr. Speaker. It is unfortunate that this has been commercialized. Cattle rustling has been commercialized into a criminal enterprise that continue to deny Kenyans from these 8 regions plus or 8 counties plus or more than 8.8 million, Mr. Speaker, that continue to suffer because their livelihood, Mr. Speaker, is cattle. It's livestock, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, and even Meru, sorry, I forgot Meru. Also, I saw the CS of Interior was with members, colleagues over the weekend. Meru also has been affected, Mr. Speaker. So this issue, and sometimes also Nandi and Kisumu, so it is an issue that is cross-cutting, Mr. Speaker. Cattle livestock theft, I'm told even in some parts of this country, in Western Kenya, people are also forced to close their cows and sleep with them in rooms because of also livestock theft. So this cattle livestock theft, cattle rustling and banditry is a national disaster, Mr. Speaker. What we want to ask our brother, Professor Senator Kithure Kindiki, Majority Leader Emeritus and the Minister of Interior, is to declare this a national disaster, Mr. Speaker, and create a special fund. And it is within the rights, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the last 6 months, I think in 2023, we lost through cattle rustling and banditry over 600, over 100 civilians, Mr. Speaker, and 16 police officers. So there are many families who today they are without their sons, their daughters, their children, their spouses, Mr. Speaker, because of trigger-happy banditry, Mr. Speaker. These regions have been made a playground of criminals, organized criminals, Mr. Speaker. And that is why even when you look, I had sponsored a bill on the livestock, against livestock theft, Mr. Speaker, of theft of livestock produce and theft. Because we were targeting, Mr. Speaker, we need to hit, to punish. Because apparently, Mr. Speaker, the financiers of this well-organized criminal enterprise in these regions that I've mentioned, Mr. Speaker, and are people who are staying in Nairobi. And they are just using innocent young men and women who have been transformed into criminals to steal livestock, and they end up in the most of the plates that we are eating in Nairobi, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, could we unknowingly be financing cattle rustling and banditry? Because most of these livestock are being slaughtered here in Nairobi and other major towns. And we buy and enjoy the sweet meat, thinking that this is maybe that cow or that animal has been stolen, that livestock, and being slaughtered, Mr. Speaker. So I think this is a menace that we mustn't, Mr. Speaker, because what happens, you saw in Baringo the other day, it was a sad situation where a body, and I saw our senator from Baringo was in that funeral, where the body was being forced to be escorted by a paramilitary, Mr. Speaker, to the resting place, the former head teacher, Mr. Speaker, who was coincidental, Mr. Speaker. It is a sad story, and I know media have carried that story, where that teacher, Mr. Speaker, was shot in 1979 when he was young to be blind by a bullet of a cattle rustler. He was also killed by the same bullet the other day, Mr. Speaker, and he was buried. Even when he was supposed to rest in peace, the bandits and cattle rustlers were shooting all over, and the funeral had to be conducted. I was thinking, are we still in Kenya? Is this Gaza? Is this Ukraine, Mr. Speaker? Is it Pakistan, Mr. Speaker? Because if it has reached a level where somebody needs to be escorted to be buried, Mr. Speaker, therefore this is a clear pointer that this must be declared as a national disaster, Mr. Speaker. And I agree with the recommendation, Mr. Speaker. The only threat in that region, and Senator Dula has captured it very well, is insecurity or livestock banditry and cattle rustling, Mr. Speaker, sir, and also drought. So I empathize with the people from this region. If they are not suffering from cattle rustling, they are suffering from the drought, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, we want to agree, even on the issue of livestock insurance cover, we must provide, Mr. Speaker, as a way forward. So that when people in Meru lose their lives or lose their livestock, we must give insurance to the lives that we have lost, unfortunately, and also give cover to the animals through livestock restocking and livestock insurance cover, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the third point that I wanted to make, Mr. Speaker, is on the issue, what is the way forward, apart from establishing this fund? My proposal is that we need to immediately reopen county security roads, Mr. Speaker. During Kibaki era, there was this road, if I can get right, from Ginya to Chemalingot, that would happen. If that area, Mr. Speaker, is open all the way to Turkana with tarmac, all these other parts are open through infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, through county roads. I can assure you, when those places are open, Mr. Speaker, it will always open that area to civilization. And what that means, the issue of cattle or insecurity in that region will come down, Mr. Speaker. And that is why many people have taken the advantage of ignorance of our people in those areas to take advantage and use it to transform into a criminal enterprise, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, apart from roads, we need to look at the education. We need to improve in infrastructure of education, Mr. Speaker. Because when you open up, when people go to school, when people from those areas that are affected by cattle rustling and banditry, Mr. Speaker, when they go there, Mr. Speaker, and they go schools, we open schools, it will allow us to open their minds, open their hearts, Mr. Speaker, spiritually and through education, so that, Mr. Speaker, they are able, Mr. Speaker, to be part of the transformation of this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, another number 3 is to call upon the national and county government, Mr. Speaker, to take affirmative action, especially in those areas. I expect these county governments that I mentioned, from Baringo, Elgeyo Marakwet, Turkana, Isiolo, Marsabit, Laikipia, West Pokot, Meru, who are affected by the livestock menace, Mr. Speaker, to make an affirmative action. We want Meru County government to make affirmative action through employment, by ensuring that we employ youth specifically from those areas so that we open up them, Mr. Speaker, by building more ECD centers, vocational training centers in those areas, so that we give the young people who are being misled, Mr. Speaker, to participate in cattle rustling and banditry an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to ensure they are in a position to be part of the transformation of this country, Mr. Speaker. Even the national government, I want to challenge, there should be affirmative action, especially when we are recruiting any state officers, civil servants, the police, the GSU, the military, among others that are being hired by the national. We must make affirmative action. So even as we talk, I want to challenge Senator Cheptumo, even as we do the national fund to compensate on the victims, he should also amend this motion to include the county governments must brief the Senate what affirmative action have they done in this Baringo, Elgeyo Marakwet, Turkana, Isiolo, Marsabit, Laikipia, West Pokot, and even your county, Mr. Speaker. And we are lucky today that we are sitting when we are discussing this motion, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, there must be a way of ensuring that we do, Mr. Speaker. Point number 4, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of water. We need to ensure water is taken to those areas, Mr. Speaker, so that we can do irrigation. I know the President has been pushing for environmental conservation. and planting of more than 15 billion trees, Mr. Speaker. I want to challenge that we ensure access to water, Mr. Speaker, so that we can do irrigations on those areas. Mr. Speaker, can you believe in most of those areas it's very fertile? If you are to give them water to irrigate their crops, I can share with the issue of food security, Mr. Speaker, we shall be able to address the food security, because that area, Mr. Speaker, in fact, is good for fruits because it is very hot, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of minerals, Mr. Speaker, can you believe most of these regions, I know there is GDC in some of those areas. There are many minerals, Mr. Speaker, in those areas. Most of these people do not want those areas to be open so that exploration and minerals can be mined for the benefit of those areas, Mr. Speaker. And you know, under the Mining Act in the local content, when you get the revenue, 70% goes to national government, 20% goes to county governments, and 10% goes to the local community under Community Development Agreement in the Mining Act of 2015. So I want to challenge Senator Cheptumo to also follow it up with the Ministry of Mining. Let us ensure we do mineral exploration, oil exploration, Mr. Speaker, but ensure, because it has a dangerous soft underbelly, Mr. Speaker, by ensuring that when we do mining and exploration of minerals in these stricken areas, Mr. Speaker, it gives them opportunity to get value for the local community, Mr. Speaker. Because even where I come from, issue of Kareba gold mine, Mr. Speaker, we had problems where community in Chemase was not getting the local through community development agreement, where you have communities through 70-20%. 70 to national, 20 to county, and 10% to the local community, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to challenge county governments in closing so that I allow my colleagues. Let us, Mr. Speaker, ensure we make sure the money that we devolve is used for the intended purposes, Mr. Speaker. Let us all, Elgeyo Marakwet, Baringo, and other areas, even in Meru, in Laikipia, let us ensure resources work. Mr. Speaker, if there is development, this menace of cattle rustling and banditry will stop if we ensure those areas are open, Mr. Speaker. So I want to challenge county governments, Mr. Speaker. I have seen a number of them because they call hardship, Mr. Speaker. For example, most of these counties are counties that are struggling because of where they are, but they get a lot of money. Mr. Speaker, are you aware Meru, Turkana, among other, of course, outside Kakamega, Garissa, Isiolo, and many other areas, Mr. Speaker, get a lot of money, over more than 15 billion, while Nandi, for example, we get 7.5 billion. But when you ask questions, Mr. Speaker, they find it uncomfortable, Mr. Speaker, and I want to challenge, because I saw individuals from Garissa County trying to answer me for raising questions, Mr. Speaker, about non-access to water, for example, in Garissa, where we have only water Bausa that supplies more than close to 1 million people in Garissa, for example, Mr. Speaker. There is no water in Garissa. When you go to Garissa Health, Mr. Speaker, former Provincial General Hospital, there is no water, Mr. Speaker, and I question it. I was shocked that the county government and the county government has sponsored a lot of news media item over the weekend while I was busy non-deserving the people, Mr. Speaker. So we must call out, and I want to tell all governors, including governor from Kisii, that a senator is not only to oversight his own county. You can decide to oversight Nandi. We have right to oversight all 47 counties, Mr. Speaker. So I want to tell those people who sponsored media stories through the governor of Garissa and the county government and the water provision that I will not be intimidated, just like the rest of the senators. We shall do oversight. And that 12 billion that was allocated to Garissa in the last financial year, 2022-2023, they must provide water to the people of Garissa. They must provide health care to the people of Garissa. They must provide bursary. We are aware of the allegations that they are buying houses here in Isili and Kilifi. We have allegations, and I want to challenge ESCC and DCI to look at the most county governments that they are misusing and misappropriating funds to their advantage, Mr. Speaker. So I want to ask, instead of buying media spaces, instead of bribing, allegations of bribing and buying media to respond and sponsoring ordinary wananchi to answer Senator Cherargei, Mr. Speaker, they should be busy providing water to the people, bursary, roads, so that we can fight this menace of drought, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and therefore with those very, very remarks, we want to thank Senator Cheptumo for this wonderful motion. I hope to see it in fruition, Mr. Speaker, and I beg to support, and I hope our brother Senator Kithure Kindiki and COG should come on board so that we ensure that we adopt this report of the motion. Asante sana, Mheshimiwa Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Chalgei. Senator Chalgei, you have actually proposed several amendments to the motion. This motion is now a property of the Senate of Kenya. It does no longer belong to Senator Cheptum alone. So what you are proposing, you can even go ahead and also amend this motion to suit your thinking. So nothing is stopping you from making those amendments yourself. Of course, in agreement with the move of the motion. Next is Senator Okoiti Andrew Omtata. Oh, sorry, just a minute, Senator Omtata. Let us first acknowledge the visiting students from Mama Ngina University College in Kiambu County. I would like to acknowledge the presence in the public gallery this morning of visiting students from Mama Ngina University College, Leadership and the Politics Club. The delegation comprises 40 students who are in the Senate for a one-day academic exposition. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I thank you. If I look at the membership present now, and the senator for Kiambu County is not around, the member who is close to these university students is none other than Senator Lemaletian Ezena. So I want to give you this opportunity to welcome them, maybe in 1 minute also.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I join the rest of my colleagues and the Honorable Chair in welcoming comrades to the upper house of Parliament. I want to assure them that their voice is fully represented in this house through me, and I want them to take a very keen note at the contributions being made by members here. You are very lucky because Kiambu County is very cosmopolitan, and I think it's within the municipality. Is it? Yeah? Metropolitan, sorry, metropolis from the People's Senator. Feel at home. I hope you learn a lot. I hope you can see how the honorable members contribute. You know that Parliament has 2 houses. You're old enough to know that. The lower house, which is the National Assembly, and the upper house, which is the Senate, gain from the wisdom of the contributions here. And also know that you have rights as citizens to bring petitions to the floor of this house. Like currently I'm holding several petitions on mental health and recommendations from various groups of young people on mental health, education and climate change. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's proceed. Senator Omtata, proceed.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this very important motion. I'll not repeat what has been stated in terms of the devastating effects of this crime called mischaracterized as cattle rustling. An important thing I would like to say, my Honor, Mr. Speaker, is that we need to locate this thing in the law. Cattle rustling is mischaracterized to the extent that even the law enforcement cannot deal with it. It should be in the penal code, and the same sanctions that apply to robbery with violence should apply to this particular activity. It's robbery with violence, nothing else. People die, a lot of property is destroyed, and people are snatched their property. So, to give it a sexy title like cattle rustling is really a way of getting away from the real issue. It's no longer, there's no relationship that used to happen in the traditional days when somebody could raid maybe with a spear and whatever to steal a few cattle for balanced issues. I don't deny that there's a cultural dimension to it in certain areas, because when I was in Southern Sudan some time back, and I was dealing with the Catholic missionaries, I came across one missionary with a story that goes like, he used to have a very, very dedicated choir master, who was a young man, who had gone to school. The guy was not married. Then one evening, the guy turns up in war regalia and comes to the priest and asks the priest for a blessing. He had a group of warriors. Then the priest asked, what is all this about? He said it was time for him to get married, and he had come with his age mates for a blessing from the priest because they were going to raid the Turkana of Kenya for cattle. There's a girl whom he had identified, but they were demanding a very high price of cattle that he did not have. So the only way you could get that girl was to go and raid cattle from the Turkana in Kenya. So if a choir master was doing that, maybe you could see the depth with which this thing may be as a cultural activity or driven by cultural activity. But what is important is that they were coming to raid cattle from Kenya. The question is, why are our borders porous? Because this crime of cattle rustling is an international crime. It's an organized international crime. People, criminal networks, sometimes use very advanced technologies to track information about where the cattle are, what markets are available, and stuff like that. And so, they're able to move around and get animals and take them to markets and they sell and dispose of. Secondly, when you look at our laws, you'll find that there's no law requiring identification of cattle or goats or sheep or any of these domestic animals at slaughterhouses and at markets. You'll go to a market and buy and sell an animal with no provisions for the identification of that animal. In my own local area, if you go on a market day, you'll go to the market and buy an animal. There's no requirement for any certification from where the animal came from to that market. They just exchange them the way they sell shirts. I think the time has come for us to come up with a law that will ensure that animals are traceable to their owners. If you're coming to sell an animal, it should be possible to trace the owner of that animal at the point of sale. That one might also help reduce the issue. The other thing I would like to address is that there is a protocol on the prevention, combating, and eradication of cattle rustling in East Africa. The last time I checked, only Uganda had signed that protocol. If you look at the protocol, it provides very, very good measures for containing cattle rustling across the borders, across international borders, and within the borders of a sovereign state like Kenya. So the failure to ratify this kind of thing also tells us that we are not serious with eradicating cattle rustling. And this was a thing that came up from the community and went beyond just the members of the East African community. It's supposed to cover 15 countries in the eastern region where there's rampant cattle rustling. So I would ask myself, how serious is our government, or what is the commitment of our government to ending this menace when they cannot even sign on protocols that are designed to tap into international networks to address this problem? The other thing the other question I have, I've always asked myself, Uganda has largely contained cattle rustling through brute force. When somebody picks up a gun to go to the another community to rob and kill and spoil, he is not a man to be handled or a woman to be handled with kid gloves, but I doubt whether women are very active in that area, although you have to be gender sensitive. So if somebody picks up a weapon to go and rob, in some country, in Uganda, if we are arrested, you are court-martialed because you are an armed combatant. They don't handle you with the kid gloves. Secondly, the response of the authorities is severe. The monopoly of violence must always stay with the state. I don't understand how the Kenyan state has lost the monopoly of violence in these areas where we have got rampant cattle rustling. The other day I read in the newspaper that, the police air wing helicopters have been grounded because of mismanagement and other things. So we can only work on, the police can only work on land. I would expect the police to be armed with helicopter gunships so that when there is an attack, they go and strafe the area with bullets. The state must maintain the monopoly of violence. But the Kenyan state has chosen to handle this problem with kid gloves. And it will be a situation whereby the elite and maybe people who control the deep state are the people who are behind the cattle rustling. Because how do you steal almost 1,000 cows and nobody sees them? It's practically impossible. I would expect a police air wing or the anti-stock theft to be armed with the attack helicopters. So that when these people take the animals, go and shoot them plus the animals. Do that 2-3 times, they will get scared. But these kid gloves of making the Minister for Interior, giving us pronunciation, trying to give threats through a soprano voice, does not add up. His body language does not even convince you that the man is serious. Let us see action, because lives of Kenyans are being lost, property of Kenyans is being destroyed, and we cannot continue the way we have been continuing. The blame lies squarely at the Kenyan state. It cannot demonstrate any single action it has taken to demonstrate that when you come to violence, we are the masters of violence. I don't see. And unless we get to the point whereby the state has a monopoly of violence, armed gangs will keep roaming around and killing people. We don't want to be Haiti, where the state has lost the monopoly of violence to gangs. And if we don't act in time, these so-called cattle rustlers can morph into other things. Because they'll be heavily armed, they can decide to declare a republic of their own within the area. What will we do? Let us nip this thing in the bud. Let us crush and destroy the cattle rustlers. And my proposal is that we should not be talking of setting up funds and whatever. There is already a provision in law for compensation for victims of crime. And so the state should be held accountable to compensate victims of crime. I support the motion, and I call on the Kenyan state to step up to the plate and up its act. I have not seen anything that has been done to fight cattle rustling. The so-called disarmaments end up nowhere. Sometimes they create an imbalance. You disarm one community, you leave another unarmed, and the armed community comes to run roughshod over the community that has been disarmed. So with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank you for the opportunity you have given me to address this House, and I support the motion, and I thank Senator Cherargei.
Senator Mtata, before you leave the floor,
yes, Mr. Speaker,
I want to question you. Standing on the 101.3, It shall be out of order to use offensive or insulting language, whether in respect of senators or other persons. So in your contribution, you have stated that a certain individual, a certain citizen of this republic has a soprano voice. So can you kindly withdraw that statement?
It's a statement. It's a
substantiate whether you are able to.
Mr. Speaker, sir, you can't substantiate the obvious. It's a statement of fact, a descriptive statement of fact. It's not an insult. It's a statement of fact. But if it is offensive, then I withdraw it and apologize.
Proceed and conclude.
So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I've not seen any action that the state has taken other than issuing baseless threats against bandits to restore the balance of arms where the state has the monopoly of violence over criminal gangs. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank you for the opportunity and for the guidance. And I was standing with Senator Cherargei, the Lion of Nandi, for the great input he has given us. I also thank Senator Dulo, the Queen of Isiolo, for the informative information she has given us, and I support the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
God bless us.
Next is Senator Joe Nyutu, Moranga Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. And I rise to support the motion by Senator Cheptumo, who has just gotten back to the House. Mr. Speaker, right from the wording of this particular motion, that, Mr. Speaker, there are very many negative socio-economic impact on the things that, on the lives of the people affected by banditry and cattle rustling, Mr. Speaker. These are very big social problem, Mr. Speaker, where we have people displaced, where we have orphans that would otherwise have been children with their parents, Mr. Speaker, where we have widowers, Mr. Speaker, and this is a matter that needs to be taken very seriously by the government, and that is why I rise to support that we declare this motion that states that seeks declaration of cattle rustling and banditry as a national disaster, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to thank the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, the Honorable C.S. Kindiki, for what he has, for his efforts, Mr. Speaker, that he has shown over the short period of time that he has been Cabinet Secretary in this particular ministry. Mr. Speaker, we have seen him even visit the grounds where these offenses happen, Mr. Speaker. And this is a job well done. We see a coordinated Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Speaker. But I think there are many other things. There is a lot of room for improvement, Mr. Speaker, where if the CS and the ministry was going, Mr. Speaker, to improve on some of the suggestions that we have, and I'm glad that you have advised that we can introduce amendments to this particular motion, Mr. Speaker. I think one of the challenges that we have been having in trying to arrest banditry and cattle rustling, Mr. Speaker, is where we send the security forces. We send our police officers, Mr. Speaker, and it has been established that I don't know why this tradition has been there, that the askaris that we send to these particular areas, Mr. Speaker, sometimes are newly recruited and trained askaris, newly posted askaris, Mr. Speaker, where they find the terrain very challenging, Mr. Speaker. I think I would want to suggest that they form a special group of askaris, Mr. Speaker, and basically and mostly those drawn from those areas. We have askaris, we have young men and women that have grown up in these bandit-prone areas, Mr. Speaker, and who are very conversant with this type of terrains that we have in those particular areas, Mr. Speaker. I would want to propose and suggest to the CS that they can pick a special, they can make a special wing, basically comprising officers who have grown up in those areas, Mr. Speaker, so that they will be able to handle that terrain. They'll be able, Mr. Speaker, to be superior in handling these bandits, Mr. Speaker. And I think that is something that is doable because we can be able to identify where people come from even when they are serving in the forces or in the service, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, banditry and cattle rustling over the years has appeared like something that cannot be arrested. But Mr. Speaker, I remember that some years back we had a problem with a group that was calling itself Sabaot Land Defense Force, SLDF, Mr. Speaker, that gave this country, and especially Kenyans living around Mount Elgon, a very great problem for a number of years, Mr. Speaker. And when enough was enough, and the army was deployed to go and arrest that problem, Mr. Speaker, it took only a few months, and the leader of that particular gang was actually killed, Mr. Speaker. I do not know why the leaders from these areas do not support or are always opposed to the deployment of the armed forces to go and arrest that particular menace, Mr. Speaker. I think this is something that should be highly thought about so that we do not have a perennial problem. This is something that can be done. This is a problem that can be arrested, Mr. Speaker, and I suggest that we look at the possibility of posting or deploying the army, Mr. Speaker, to go and arrest this problem, Mr. Speaker. I have listened to Senator Cheralge indicating, and I think I concur with him, that there could be people, sometimes even in Parliament, Mr. Speaker, that support this cattle rustling for the commercial benefits that they get from this, Mr. Speaker. I think we should have a special investigative team, Mr. Speaker, to investigate and see who funds, if at all, these rustlers, Mr. Speaker, so that whoever it is, we cannot continue having our people killed. We cannot continue seeing our people lose their life investments in their livestock that they keep, Mr. Speaker, just because there are some people that could be powerful somewhere that support this particular problem, Mr. Speaker, or this banditry. Mr. Speaker, let us establish a special investigative group that will investigate, establish who funds these people, who supports these people, who gives these people protection, political or otherwise, Mr. Speaker, so that we can be able to deal with this problem once and for all. Most of these animals, Madam Speaker now, most of these animals, when stolen, they are transported to big towns and cities where they are slaughtered and sold as meat to city residents, Madam Speaker. I think we need to tighten the noose. We need to have some very good programs on transportation of animals. We should be able to establish the source of animals transported on a daily basis, Madam Speaker, so that if we have reason to believe that the animals being transported are animals that could have been stolen, then I think we can have an intervention before these animals reach the market. Because if there was not going to be any market for these stolen animals, then of course, Madam Speaker, we would not have people stealing these animals, and that way we would be able to arrest this problem, Madam Speaker, because these animals are not, once stolen, they are not kept by the bandits. They are transported for slaughtering. We should be able to come up with a method of seeing to it that all the animals in transit are animals that have been acquired genuinely, Madam Speaker. These bandits always have some very sophisticated firearms. We do not manufacture firearms in this country. The last time I checked, we were not manufacturing firearms. How do these firearms get into our country, Madam Speaker? I think that is a question that we need to ask ourselves. How do these firearms get into our country? I mean, we have only manned entry points. Why do these firearms enter our country? Who influences this illegal entry? Because there must be some collusion somewhere. It cannot be that these firearms just get into the country. I think we also need to investigate and know who colludes with the illegal importers of firearms that eventually get into the hands of these bandits, Madam Speaker. I think I want to really support the idea of establishing a special fund to deal with this matter, because we need to put up schools in these areas. We need to put up hospitals in these areas, Madam Speaker. We need to finance these people. We need to sensitize the people living in these areas, Madam Speaker, so that they can be able to know when a young man is growing and when they have been taken to school, they should be sensitized. They should know that opportunities exist. That if you go to school, you do not have to rely on banditry in order for you to be gainfully employed, Madam Speaker. And I think this funding will be of utmost importance. We need to know, we also need to train our people that we do not, to also carry out, rearing of animals in a better way, in a way that can also be profitable to them. And I think this fund will go a long way if established as proposed in this particular motion. And Madam Speaker, I can see the yellow light from the clerk's desk. I do not want to continue, but I want to say that this is one of the most progressive motions that we have had in this particular house in the recent past, and I want to thank Senator Cheptumo for this well-thought motion, and to which we will be introducing amendments as advised by the Deputy Speaker. Madam Speaker, I support this motion. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Joe Nyoto. Senator Beatrice Akinyi Ogola.
Madam Speaker, as I rise to support the motion on cattle rustling and banditry, Madam Speaker, I want to say from the onset that banditry in itself and cattle rustling is an act of criminality from the word go. Madam Speaker, it looks like these are organized criminal activities, and that specifically just points to an organized way of doing business. And to me, Madam Speaker, it is somebody's business. Madam Speaker, sometimes back, when there were issues of piracy in the ocean and our water bodies, somebody made a remark that convinced me that pirates cannot survive and do their business without support from the ground. And Madam Speaker, I relate that with the issue, the criminality of banditry and cattle rustling. Madam Speaker, it is a criminal and must be dealt with just the way other organized criminal activities are dealt with. Madam Speaker, the act of banditry and cattle disrupts lives. There are activities that disrupts livelihoods of the people. They result in loss of life. They disrupt life, Madam Speaker, to the extent that schools cannot go on. And Madam Speaker, with the policy we have in this Republic of Education for All, it means that there are certain regions that do not have their school calendars going on as expected. And Madam Speaker, finally, they do the same examinations and they are rated just like other Kenyans. And Madam Speaker, that is something that must concern us as a people, as leadership, as parliament, as the executive. Madam Speaker, because of this criminality, and as I've said, schools are disrupted. Madam Speaker, health services to the people are disrupted, because once they are displaced, it means that the people who have been displaced cannot get the usual services that they get. So what happens to them when they fall sick, Madam Speaker? What happens to the ones that go to school? What happens to their normal businesses, Madam Speaker? And Madam Speaker, because banditry and castle rustling results in displacement of people. Madam Speaker, when even personnel are their advertisement, even in the local county governments in those areas, or the national government as a whole, there are people who always fear going for jobs in those areas. And Madam Speaker, that basically means that the people where cattle rustling and banditry is prone lacked the skilled, the equitable skills that other regions get from all Kenyans, Madam Speaker, because in this republic, anybody can work elsewhere. Madam Speaker, I've often heard, even in our villages, young men who'd want to venture in going and work in those areas, they are hesitant when adverts are made. And Madam Speaker, that means these skills, these people in those areas cannot get the required skills that they should be having. Madam Speaker, cattle rustling, as I've said, being a criminality, I want to state that investigations must be done to unearth the masterminds of these activities. Because to me, Madam Speaker, banditry should be treated as an extreme act of criminality. And so there must be investigations from the investigative arm of this government, so that the masterminds of these criminal gangs are unearthed. And Madam Speaker, just as we have a policy where proceeds from even criminal issues like money laundering are mapped and returned back to the state, why can't investigations be done? Proceeds from such acts of banditry and cattle rustling must be mapped, and declarations must be made about those proceeds, so that they are sunk back into the economy of this country. And Madam Speaker, as the people behind these criminal activities are mapped, I want to suggest, Madam Speaker, that they must also be named and shamed. Madam Speaker, because they are causing great loss to our people, they are creating great disruption of activities to our people, and so other than investigations being done, these people must be named, and Madam Speaker, they must be shamed, and Madam Speaker, they must also face they must also be prosecuted. They must face the law. Madam Speaker, in areas where in my constituency, there has been a practice where people wake up one day and we just find sheep, goats, and cattle knifed in the middle of the night. That has been a usual occurrence sometimes back in my constituency in Dewa. And those are the criminal gangs we are talking about. Because what would be the purpose of such acts of criminality? And Madam Speaker, we are saying, as I support this motion, we want to say that the reasons for such activities must also be brought to book. Madam Speaker, the issue of castle rustling, other than areas that Senator Sheptumo mentioned, and other senators have mentioned, there has been the usual practice of the conflicts around Sondu and Nyakach. And Madam Speaker, when you look at them, sometimes they are not just have an objective of picking the cattle, but they have deeper objective of causing hostilities between communities that have otherwise lived very peacefully. Madam Speaker, an example of Sondu I've given, we have the Luos and the Kalenjins that have lived there. They have intermarried. They go to the same market. They live happily every day. They trade together. They intermarry. They marry their girls. We marry their girls. But one day, on a night, you just wake up and find people have stormed the other community and causing unnecessarily conflict. Where I say, Madam Speaker, those are acts of criminality. Those are acts that must be investigated. And Madam Speaker, as a country, we cannot keep on talking about this banditry, about this cattle rustling.
In the gallery this afternoon, we have 163 students from Kuru Girls High School in Kisumu County who are undertaking an education visit in the Senate. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. Also in the Speaker's Gallery this afternoon, we have 38 students from the University of Nairobi in Nairobi County who are undertaking an education visit in the Senate. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow the Senator for Nairobi County, Senator Sifuna, to extend a warm welcome to both delegations.
Mr. Speaker, for the record and avoidance of doubt and to shame the devil, I did in fact attend the University of Nairobi for 4 years. For me, Mr. Speaker, you must protect me from the hecklers from lesser institutions so that I can be able to undertake the mandate you have given me of welcoming the students from the University of Nairobi, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in
fact... Order, Honorable Senators. Proceed to welcome the delegation.
Mr. Speaker, you can see very clearly those who went to school properly and those who did not. In the manner in which they are... Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Sifuna,
yes.
Proceed to welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is quite a coincidence because about 20 years ago, I was standing at Graduation Square at the University of Nairobi, receiving my degree as a lawyer. And I went back to those grounds, Mr. Speaker, for the first time in those 20 years, just today, because there is a festival that is organized by the Center of Multi-Party Democracy called the People's Dialogue Festival. And I was quite emotional to go back to my alma mater. So I want to take this opportunity to welcome the students from the University of Nairobi that have paid us a courtesy call this afternoon, and also the other students who are also with us this afternoon. I want to take this opportunity to welcome them to the Senate. This indeed is a house of debate and a house of respectable men and women from time to time. You will encounter some of those. Mr. Speaker, I wish them a fruitful visit to the Senate. I wish that they will be able to learn something and to pick up whatever good they will be able to see from the Senate this afternoon. And we are hoping that we will grow generations of leaders. In fact, I have said that the University of Nairobi today, Mr. Speaker, that our responsibility as the current leadership in this country is to create a country that the young ones will be proud of and will not be lamenting the way that I had Professor Ouma lamenting about the loss of nationhood and the proliferation of tribalism and other ills in our society. So I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity, and I wish them a fruitful visit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Fuller, kindly take your seat. Now, honorable senators, I will now proceed to propose the question, which is that the Senate adopt the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the 2024 budget policy statement laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 5th of March, 2024, and pursuant to Section 25(7) of the Public Finance Management Act and Standing Order 186(8), the Senate approves the 2024 budget policy statement. What is your point of order, Majority Leader?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order number 111 that debate on the question on the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the 2024 budget policy statement be limited to 4 minutes, Mr. Speaker, for each Senate while contributing. Reason is, Mr. Speaker, this report has a statutory deadline. Members will recall that we had to move an extension of 1 week, and we must vote on it today. Given that many senators will want to speak on the same, Mr. Speaker, I think the fair thing to do is to allow all of us to speak, but at a limited time. Therefore, I propose 4 minutes. Mr. Speaker, I request the Senator for Lamu to second.
Mr. Speaker, I second.
Honorable Sifuna, you're out of order. Now, honorable senators, we need not debate that motion. But if you wish to debate, then I'll proceed to propose the question. However, if you allow, I may proceed to put the question so that we conclude this matter and go to the substance of the motion before us. Honorable senators, I will proceed to put the question. That pursuant to Standing Order 1111, debate on the motion on the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the 2024 budget policy statement be limited to 4 minutes per senator contributing. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? Nay. The ayes have it. Senator Munyehaji Mohamed Faki.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii kuchangia ripoti ya kamati ya fedha na bajeti ya Senate kwa taarifa ya sera ya bajeti ya mwaka 2024-2025. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi pia nijiunge na wewe pamoja na Senator Sifuna kuwakaribisha wanafunzi wa chuo kikuu cha Nairobi. Nilipita chuo hicho miaka 34 iliyopita. Kwa hivyo hata mimi pia najivunia kwa mmoja wa waliosoma katika chuo hicho. Mheshimiwa Spika, ripoti hii ni muhimu sana kwa sababu inatoa mwongozo wa serikali kuhusiana na masuala ya bajeti katika mwaka ambao utaanza Julai mwaka huu na kuisha Juni mwaka ujao. Mheshimiwa Spika, ningependa kwanza kuipongeza kamati kwa kuweza kuchambua sera hii na kuona kwamba yako mambo kadha wa kadha ambayo yameangaziwa hapa, ambao mambo yale yanaathiri zaidi kaunti zetu. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa kwanza ni kwamba kumekuwa na malumbukizi ya pending bills, yani madeni yanayodaiwa serikali kuu na vile vile pia serikali za kaunti. Mheshimiwa Spika, madeni haya yanaathiri sana wawekezaji wa kibinafsi ambao wanafanya kazi au wanafanya biashara na kaunti zetu na vile vile pia kufanya biashara na serikali. Mheshimiwa Spika, ikiwa serikali hailipi kwa wakati, ikiwa kaunti zetu hazilipi kwa wakati, ina maana kwamba wawekezaji wale wataingia katika madeni na kupoteza rasilimali zao na vile vile pia kupoteza mtaji ambao ni muhimu kuendesha uchumi wa nchi hii. Mheshimiwa Spika, jambo la pili ni kuwa kuna swala la kuajiri kwa wafanyaji kazi wa afya 20,000. Mheshimiwa Spika, tunajua kwamba afya ni moja katika huduma ambazo zimegatuliwa. Kwa nini serikali, Mheshimiwa Spika, inaajiri wafanyaji kazi 20,000? Serikali kuu inaajiri wafanyaji kazi 20,000 wakati kila kaunti, Mheshimiwa Spika, ina nafasi ya kuajiri watu hawa, na zile pesa ambazo zimebakia kwa serikali kuu ambazo zingepaswa kushuka katika kaunti zetu haziwezi kushuka. Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, jambo la tatu ni kwamba serikali ilikuwa imependekeza bilioni 391 ziende katika kaunti zetu, lakini Mheshimiwa Spika, tukiangalia ni kuwa hii ingekuwa ni asilimia ndogo sana ya pesa ambazo zinapelekwa katika kaunti zetu. Mheshimiwa Spika, tukiangalia kwamba gharama zimepanda katika utendakazi ama huduma ambazo zinatolewa katika kaunti zetu. Tukiangalia mishahara peke yake, Mheshimiwa Spika, imeongezeka kwa sababu kumeongezeka kodi kadhaa ambazo zimeathiri mishahara. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa kusema hivyo ni kuwa ile ongezeko la asilimia 1.5 ambayo kwenye ile iliyotolewa mwaka uliopita, yani bilioni 385.425 ingekuwa imeongezeka kwa asilimia 1.5 peke yake. Kwa Mheshimiwa Spika, nakubaliana na kamati kwamba fedha ziongezwe kufikia bilioni 415 kwa uchache. Mheshimiwa Spika, swala nyingine ambalo ningelichangia pia ni kuhusiana na ile inaitwa contribution in lieu of rates. Kuna baadhi ya miji kaunti kama vile Nairobi, Kisumu, Mombasa ambazo zilikuwa zinakusanya kodi ya viwanja, yani rates, kabla ya kuja kwa ugatuzi. Mheshimiwa Spika, kaunti hizi zilikuwa zinalipwa ile inaitwa contribution in...
Senator, your time is up. Senator Aaron Cheriot, you've limited debate. You've just passed a motion to limit debate, Senator Faki.
Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised because Senator Faki was very loud in passing the 4 minutes, and I wonder why. Mr. Speaker, I want to be extremely brief because this is a very straightforward matter, budget and policy statement, and there is a history to why I really want us as a House to pass this report, because on many occasions over the years, the National Treasury has continued to come back to us months later and say, we received your reports late after the statutory timeline, therefore it was impossible for us to consider whatever recommendations you had prepared for us. Therefore, today, being the last day, I'd wish to request, Mr. Speaker, that upon the completion of this debate, that members actually do stick in the House so that we can vote and send our recommendations to the Treasury. There are very important policy recommendations that are in this report, Mr. Speaker, but there is only one that is of extreme interest to me, and we must reason together as a House. Mr. Speaker, it's on the issue of fiscal deficit. If you read recommendation on financial implications, recommendation C, there is a proposal, Mr. Speaker, from the committee that fiscal deficit for 2024-2025 be binding at 703.9 billion, which is 3.9% of the GDP. Mr. Speaker, it has been described elsewhere that insanity is actually trying to do the same things over and over again while expecting different results each time. We have done this many times before. Considered budget and policy statement, set a fiscal deficit as a certain percentage, yet we know that these figures are continually breached by our colleagues in the National Assembly who pass further supplementary budgets to this, and of course the National Treasury, Mr. Speaker. I strongly feel, Mr. Speaker, that it is only the Senate that can rescue the people of Kenya from this continuous mismanagement of our economy, Mr. Speaker. It is until the Budget and Finance Committee proposes an amendment to PFM regulations, Mr. Speaker, such that we will limit the powers of both the National Assembly and the Treasury, Mr. Speaker. Because, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, this practice has permeated even our counties. Many governors continue to budget with revenues that are high in the sky, Mr. Speaker, only with the sole interest, Mr. Speaker, of issuing tenders and eventually end up with huge pending bills that cannot be budgeted and met, Mr. Speaker. The same is being witnessed in our National Treasury, Mr. Speaker. So, unless we do an amendment, Mr. Speaker, such that we know, number one, the revenues that are being projected, it is known to all and sundry that it is near to impossible that in the next financial year, GOK will collect 3.4 trillion as is being projected. So already, even that calculation of 3.9% is on a projected revenue, something that we know is unattainable, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, until we move an amendment and propose to the nation, Mr. Speaker, that in doing our revenue projections, we cannot over-project, Mr. Speaker, over and beyond the projected revenue growth by percentage of the GDP, Mr. Speaker, such that if you're calculating the fiscal deficit, Mr. Speaker, then you maintain it within realms of reality, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, it's going to be business as usual. We are going to continue wallowing in this dismal performance situation, Mr. Speaker, with our debt problems, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I want to encourage the Committee on Budget and Finance, move us with an amendment so that we guide the country in the proper direction with regards to this very sticky issue of the fiscal deficit. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Sifuna.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I was reading this report, I was very curious to know, to hear from the Commission on Revenue Allocation, the Constitutional Commission that is supposed to make recommendations to this House under Article 216 on the basis of a sharing of revenue between the two levels of government. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that in the last financial year, the CRA actually recommended that counties should receive 407 billion shillings. And if indeed, as captured in this report, we have seen 6% growth and everything that has changed, including the rise of the total figure of the budget, what is the rationale then for the CRA to then recommend a lower amount than what they recommended last year? Number two, Mr. Speaker, there are some very telling observations by the committee in this particular report. And I want to start with the observation at page 27 of the committee's report, Mr. Speaker. At page 27 in paragraph 54, you will see that the National Treasury itself was telling our committee that ordinary revenue collection has experienced shortfalls since July 2023. Now, you have to ask yourself, here with me, Mr. Speaker, a report from the Central Bank. You know, I learned from the last two sessions. And this year, there's a song that says, ni mwaka wa kufosi. The point of order gang are going to have a problem because we are going to come to this floor armed. Mr. Speaker, this is a market perception survey by the Central Bank of Kenya of January 2023. And if you go through it, Mr. Speaker, some of the most damning findings are all citing, these are a survey of industry players, employers, and so on and so forth. And I want to begin at page 7 of that report, Mr. Speaker. Out of this survey by the CBK, 46% of employers in this country were saying they won't, definitely will not, or probably will not retain the workforce that they have at the moment. Because, and again, Mr. Speaker, I cite this report of concerns on high cost of living and the weaker shilling. This question of high cost of living is replicated throughout this report, Mr. Speaker. And this is why when we have these conversations about taxation, I am hoping that my colleagues will accept that in fact it has a negative effect on the overall performance of the economy. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I have seen a recommendation or an observation at page 10 of the report regarding pending bills, that they are now so high, they are at 5% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, if we do not do something as a House, in line with the recommendation that was brought by Senator Osotsi and his committee, on making sure that if there is any money that is sent to the counties, it has to be ring-fenced, a section of it has to be ring-fenced for payment of pending bills. In Nairobi, we are over 100 billion shillings, Mr. Speaker, owed by the county government to suppliers across the county. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by saying I support this proposal by our own committee that in fact the shareable revenue to the counties this year should be 415 billion. And I'm hoping, Senator Roba, this time around your committee will not run away from your own recommendations the way you did last year. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm a member of this committee, and therefore the chairman has spoken for all of us. But two salient points that I would like to speak to. Mr. Speaker, the first one is the advice that we are giving the House arising from our industry, which has been thorough, that we should adopt the figure of 415 billion .9522. This figure has been informed by wide consultations, Mr. Speaker, and we are aware that the figure deviates from the wish of the National Treasury, which wanted or preferred a figure of 391.1 billion. It moves away from the proposal by the Council of Governors of 439 billion. Mr. Speaker, why I would like this House to move and adopt the proposal by the committee is that this committee is very critical. The number of hours we have put in, Mr. Speaker, the honesty, the science that we have put in, we would like the committee to stand behind us. If for anything else, but for the fact that I suspect in the National Assembly, the National Assembly is going to agree to the figure of 391.1 by the National Treasury. So I foresee going forward, we are going to differ as two houses on this figure. And as we differ, let us defend our figure. We are not supporting the National Treasury the way we did last time, because at that time, there was the issue of public debt, which fortunately the government, through our party leader and His Excellency the President, has said that they are now managing the issue of public debt. My second and last point, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of on-source revenue. Colleagues, we should go back to our counties. The real center of abuse of office through corruption is how this on-source revenue is managed by governors. Let me give you an example. The economy of Kakamega is very close to the economy of Bungoma. But Bungoma then tells us that on-source revenue, last year, they collected 379 billion. And Kakamega, which is very close, 379 million shillings. And Kakamega, which is very close in more or less everything, collected 1.3 billion. Billion. Something is wrong. You know Meru. Meru is cheating us that they collected 418 million shillings only. Really? Meru? That Meru is close to Bungoma. That is not true. Meru is very rich. Factor in Mara, factor in all the good things you know about Meru. There's a lot of theft going on. And the worst theft, Mr. Speaker, is from Nairobi. They collected only 10 billion. 10 billion.
Senator Osotsi.
Mr. Speaker, allow me to, from the onset, to say I support this report by the Finance and Budget Committee on the budget policy statement. Just want to point out a few things, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of county allocation. I want to agree with the Committee of Finance that the figure proposed by CRA of 391.1 billion is too low, and it doesn't take into account the growth in the economy, and therefore asking for 415.9 is not asking for much, because it's just 6.4% of the revenue growth. So we look forward to the members of the National Assembly supporting this proposal when we get to the point of division of revenue. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the only institution that has the powers to make the final decision on the division of revenue is the Senate. I sat in some function this weekend, and I had a commissioner of CRA telling people that we are going to give counties 391 billion. And I wondered, when did the CRA have powers to give money to the counties? They only recommend, and the Senate is there to decide. So we will decide, and will be guided by this proposal by the Finance Committee of 415 billion shillings. Mr. Speaker, while talking about the allocation to the counties, we know that the allocation of this money is based on the latest approved audited reports. Mr. Speaker, the report that is being considered is a report for the financial year 2020-2021. Mr. Speaker, this is a problem because the amount of money being considered is 1.57 trillion shillings. And yet, the latest incomes are at 2.9 trillion shillings, which means there is a loss there. That means the National Assembly is sleeping on the job. And I think we need to change the law so that us who deal with counties, we go by the audited reports for the counties. Because counties are losing out revenue or allocation because of unnecessary delays by the National Assembly to approve the audited reports. Mr. Speaker, I have also seen a recommendation on mineral royalties of about 1 billion shillings, and I want to say that in the last report, I was disappointed that the counties in the western region, including my own county, Kakamega County, where people mine gold, did not get even a single cent of the mineral royalties. So we would like to know which criteria is being used to allocate mineral royalties to counties. The issue of the industrial park, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad they have put 4.5 billion shillings for the 18 counties that did not get, and I hope this time it will be possible.
Senator Katuri Murungi.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me also this opportunity to also give my input on this budget, this proposal. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk to one area which is known as pending bills, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the pending bills, according to this report, contribute up to 5% of GDP, Mr. Speaker. When we have these pending bills, it means, Mr. Speaker, that there is no liquidity in the private sector. And also those who have done that business, there is no profitability at all. So, Mr. Speaker, if you walk around this country nowadays, completely businesses are down. And this is caused by this type of pending bills, Mr. Speaker. In other counties, Mr. Speaker, you know, like Meru County, for example, during the last financial year, the budget that was set there for roads, Mr. Speaker, almost 501 million, the county government of Meru decided to take that back to a program called MTF, Mechanical Transport Fund. So all that money was given back to the Ministry of Transport so that they can use their machines to do the roads in Meru. What does that tell you, Mr. Speaker? That tells you that in Meru, anybody with a grinder or a tipper or a shovel is not doing business. All the people employed by these business people, they are not doing any business. If you drive from light away from a place called Ikeri in Meru, trucks are parked beside the road up to Meltown and up to Maua, Mr. Speaker, simply because there is no business for these contractors doing business in this county, Mr. Speaker. Another point that is so interesting, Mr. Speaker, is the own source revenue. And honorable senators, the courts have agreed with us that we really need to also oversight the own source revenue that is generated by the counties. So from this financial, let us go down to these counties and let us get the facts and the comparable figures, Mr. Speaker. Because sometimes in Meru County, the revenue was almost 800 million. Nowadays, they hardly even get 400 million, Mr. Speaker. Even I don't know where this Honorable Senator Karwale got the 400 million from Meru. Last year was 380 million. And during the budget, they proposed the proposed budget, they did the budget with the projection of 860 million, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy today that Senator Mboni Karwale has agreed with me that Meru has a problem. For almost 2 years, he did not see that problem, Mr. Speaker. But today, I'm happy that he has agreed with me that Meru has a problem, that Meru is not generating income, that the people are cheating with these figures. So, Honorable Karwale, today I'll see you in the evening, and I think I will take you out today, because now we are on the same wavelength. Honorable Karwale, let us really protect the devolution. I'm happy that moving forward now, almost all the senators are agreeing with all of us that we have problems in our counties, including the passionate contribution by the senator for Nakuru last week, that Nakuru has problems. We agreed with that. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Senator Ledama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll go straight to supporting this report by the Finance Committee. And let me put it this way. I've been in this Senate now for almost 7 years. And I'm so impressed with the work that Captain Ali Roba and Eddie Gisheru and Tabitha, among other, and yeah, I don't know whether you're in that committee or not, among all the other members of the Finance Committee are doing. Mr. Speaker, it is a crisis in this country. And this is at the point where I'm now going to propose that this House, and I will bring a motion, so that we move a motion to be able to ensure that all county governments pay their pending bills before the end of this financial year. Mr. Speaker, 5% of our GDP is pending bills. That is an indication of a failed economy. And that is the reason why it becomes even difficult for even Treasury to propose any increment. You know, the law requires that pending bills to become the first charge on the account. But these county governors have been ignoring that. Mr. Speaker, when reading that report, it is very sad that the proposed increment to county government is not even, is not even going to be able to support the payroll of county governments. I hope that we can bring in an amendment to increase it to the 6.4%, which is the bare minimum to allow these counties to function. Mr. Speaker, the challenge we have is that we know where people are breaking the law, we know where the county governments are diverting the money, but we don't have the guts to say enough is enough. I want to beseech you, because of the time, that as we support this, can we at least increase the money to the proposal of the committee to around 415 billion? If you increase it by 1.5%, what exactly are you doing? We are stagnating the economic growth. And the first thing that will help us to be able to make some progress, if we allow to move as a resolution of this House, that all pending bills must be paid before the end of the financial year. Mr. Speaker, you know, when you have pending bills, and that is what I'm going to focus on, you have a stagnating economy, a stalled economy. Look at what is happening across the country, Mr. Speaker. There is mushrooming a lot of elephant projects which are not complete. They cannot be completed. It is about time that we become diligent. The Treasury has recommended 9 value chains. Why leave out sugarcane? I want to beseech the Finance Committee to bring in an amendment so that we add sugarcane as the 10th value chain, so that we grow with everybody in this economy. This challenge we have, or even reducing it to 4 minutes, it's a crisis, Mr. Speaker. Lastly, because I know my time will end, MES, the time for MES has lapsed. Why don't we bring an amendment so that we can increase, maybe introduce another 5.86 billion so that we can bring an alternative to the MES? So, Mr. Speaker, the only way that we are going to really grow this economy is if we take all sectors. We support each and every sector. You know, the work that has been done by this committee is important. But like my colleague has said before, I hope that the time when we will be, at the time when we will be now voting for the division of revenue, people will not run away from their recommendations.
What is your point of order, Vice Chair?
Is it
budget? Senator Mutinda. Okay, let's go to Senator Wamatinga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this chance. Let me say that I also like to support this report. Mr. Speaker, sir, on the onset, let me also start by commending the committee for the good work that they have done. Mr. Speaker, sir, a lot has been said about increasing revenue to the county government. I agree with that, Mr. Speaker, sir. But we must go beyond increasing revenue to the counties. We must also ensure that we put in place sound monitoring systems, sound financial systems that can lead the governors and the expenditure of the county can be followed. Mr. Speaker, sir, living at the age where we have intelligent applications, financial applications, it is unfortunate that pending bills have crippled some of the economies. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, on the onset, that I am very happy to come from a county that has 0 pending bill. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is important, and indeed, we must all realize as senators that all the business that is done in the county governments are done by Kenyans. When we have millions and billions of shillings as pending bills for jobs that were done, and the most unfortunate thing, Mr. Speaker, sir, some of the pending bills have been put by people so that they can be able to armstreet the traders so that they can make money from them. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are living at an age where we should not allow blackmail of people who sincerely do business in this country. It is time that we call it the way it is supposed to be called. Mr. Speaker, sir, we know most of the counties that have changed governors over time. They twist the traders from the previous regime. They refuse to pay them. They require them to give a lot of money that the traders are not able to. This we must, as a house, protect. And the only way to do that, Mr. Speaker, sir, is to insist that pending bill must become, as is and anchored in the law, the first charge. If the failure to which, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are not only killing a lot of businesses, we are also ruining many families, Mr. Speaker, sir, and killing the morale of many would-be investors, and especially youth, women, and people living with disabilities who have trended with the county governments. They are not able to access money. As I wind up, Mr. Speaker, sir, let us also look at the implementation of the projects that are being done by the national government, by the county government. Why? In some places, Mr. Speaker, sir, there is a lot of duplication which leads to theft of public fund. Calling it the way it is, Mr. Speaker, it is a high time this Senate used the tools that have been given to them, as limited as it is, to ensure that we enhance oversight and indeed ensure that devolution works. Mr. Speaker, sir, I support.
Thank you. Next is Senator Onyonka Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am actually very happy to stand here and discuss this issue. First of all, I would like to thank my chair, Honorable Ali Roba, who was actually in our committee, Mr. Speaker, has been behaving like our father. His experience has helped because he has served as a governor before, so there were certain issues that he would bring forth to us. Mr. Speaker, I know there isn't a lot of time for me to say many things, so I'm going to be very, very short. Number one, I support and agree with my colleagues that the amount of money that we are actually asking for as members of the County Assembly members who have been, members of the National Assembly and the Senate who've been in this committee, and indeed all our colleagues, I support that we should stick at the figure of 415. That is not too much to ask. That is what our responsibility is. And I would like to say that I think that is expected of us. Number two, Mr. Speaker, the key officers and indeed government people, the government team that we were engaged in, I would like to thank my teacher, Professor Ndungu, who constantly has been coming to our committees, and even when we try and push him, he tries to explain. I hope he will change his heart and talk to the president that actually sometimes some of these things are a win-win, Mr. Speaker. If we get the 414 billion, for me, I will see it as a bipartisan agreement on how we can move forward. My colleagues have discussed various issues. I'm just going to pick about one or two. Number one, the National Assembly is using the 2020-2021 financial year's audited reports for us to have this figure that is being given. Mr. Speaker, since then, if you realize collectible revenue has increased, the expectation is that actually our revenue is going to be at about 3.9 trillion. That is quite a substantive amount of money. Why can't we just increase the amount of money that we're giving the counties by 10%? Simple logic, it makes sense, and it will make sure that our counties will operate fully, for the reason that this amount of money we take will handle, like I saw my colleague say, the issues of wage bills. It will take care of the factor of inflation and many other issues that are bedeviling the counties. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that, yeah, my colleagues have raised it. I have raised it severally. Let us sort out the issue of pending bills in our county governments. Some of our counties actually have, in the CRF account, they have money which can be cascaded down to people who have been working in our countries and who have not been paid. The ones who had increased the amounts fraudulently or otherwise, I believe the government should take care of this. But people who genuinely worked and genuinely delivered, let them be paid so that then our country can move forward. Mr. Speaker, because we don't have time, I want to say thank you so much, and I want to recommend to my colleagues to actually read this report, because it has very, very substantial material and information that will help the country move forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Good. Next is Senator Commissioner Joyce Chepkoech.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Allow me, Honorable Speaker, to commend the wonderful job that has been done by the Finance Committee, led by the Chair, Honorable Ali Roba, and our Lady, Honorable Mutinda. And I want to say, Honorable Speaker, that indeed the report has captured a number of issues. And I want to really talk about the county governments, Honorable Speaker, the ceiling that has been given to the county, the proposed for the county government, that is the 391 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker, which translates to around 13%, Honorable Speaker, far much below from the actual ceilings that is within the Constitution of 15%, Honorable Speaker. I want to say that, Honorable Speaker, it is upon this House to make sure that things work the right way, and I want to say that despite the fact that the Senate is in charge of making sure that devolution works, it is also this House that should put the governors to their toes in terms of the oversight, Honorable Speaker, because there are a number of issues that are being witnessed, especially the issues of the pending bills, which is really affecting a number of counties, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the majority leader talked about the changes or the amendments that are supposed to be done to the BFM Act, Honorable Speaker. I want to really emphasize on this, that this House should up the game on this amendment, Honorable Speaker, to an extent that the government, the county governments should be able to observe the BFM Act in terms of operation, Honorable Speaker. You find nowadays, Honorable Speaker, a number of counties doesn't observe the percentage that is given to development and the percentage that is given to the recurrent, to an extent that despite the fact that the senators are fighting for the resources to be sent to the counties, they don't adhere to it, Honorable Speaker, or they don't prudently use the resources, Honorable Speaker. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, is the transfers functions that I want to say the issues of that has been transferred. For example, the issues of the libraries, the 33 libraries which are supposed to be constructed in the 33 counties. Honorable Speaker, I want also to say that once we transfer this, the functions should, the money should follow the function, Honorable Speaker. And in that the sense, Honorable Speaker, I want to urge that as we fight for this, let's also make sure that we give them the resources to be able to operate. Otherwise, Honorable Speaker, I support the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Joyce. Next is Senator Agnes Kavidu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support and congratulate the chairperson of this committee and his vice, Mutinda. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with them that the counties should get the 4.15 9522 billion without being deducted a penny, because even if this was done with the current money that is there in the national government, it could have been more than this. The 15% could be more than this. So this should not be reduced anything, and we plead and beg the National Assembly to agree with us and know that we are the defenders of the devolutions, and they should not tamper with this again the way they did last time. And I should also request the Senate also, especially the majority side, to support fully each one of you, because if we keep on reducing these monies from the counties, then our counties will not develop the way it's supposed to be. Another thing, Mr. Speaker, is that the pending bills are just too much in most of the counties. In Machakos, we are talking of pending bills of almost 3 billion. The former governor left pending bills of 2.80 with a lot of stored projects, Mr. Speaker. And so I support that the pending bills should be dealt with and cleared immediately, so that the counties can move forward, and the people who did the work and have not been paid. Mr. Speaker, majority of these people, even some of them died, because they take loans, bank loans, and they are auctioned by banks because the counties have not paid them. Mr. Speaker, we should, the committee, I hope Bwana Roba, Senator Roba, you can listen so that you can pick what we are saying. I'm saying, if you can do something about the pending bills, that we will make sure that the counties pay the pending bills immediately they receive their monies. And another challenge that the counties are facing is the exchequer. They don't release monies to the counties in time. We are suffering in counties because the monies to the counties are not released in time. So I also ask the Treasury to make sure that they release the monies to the counties in good time, so that the governors will be able to work and do what they are supposed to do in good time. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate this committee and say that they've done a good job, and continue with it and keep it up. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Senator Medu, you know I'm confused because you have placed both the request to speak and intervention. You need some tutorials on how to use those buttons, those two buttons. But before I give you, just Senator Chalagay can give you some Then we have Senator Keloche Tabitha.
Before he knows. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity also to support the report by the Finance and Budget Committee, which I'm also a member. And I want to take this opportunity also to congratulate our chair and all the members that have done and the vice chair that have my namesake, that have done a very nice job. I want to echo my senator, the senators that have spoken before me, especially when it comes to the own source revenue collection. I would wish the senators to ensure that we push in all the counties to ensure that automated systems are put on collecting this own source revenue to ensure that we control the theft and the corruption that is being witnessed on a day-to-day in our counties. I think Nakuru broke the record. It dropped from 3.6 billion to 1.6 billion. What would you explain that? That is pure corruption. And I'm very sure people put that money in their pockets. And our MCAs had no shame to go around the county saying that the control of budget had made the mistake. The other day I saw them calling for public substitution because now they had to cut the projects or the development that they had already projected. So I think it's a high time all of us ensured and pushed to ensure that all the counties put this automated system to ensure that collection of the money, it is pure, and I can tell you if these are put, this money will be enough even to support the national government. When we talk of the taxes, because we keep on talking of the taxes, the business people feel they are left out. So it's a high time now we ensure that our government ensures that the ease of doing business in our country is happening. Because it's not about the taxation. I think the issue is on the ease of doing business. And that is what people are suffering from. Every day industries are being closed. I think you saw yesterday the headline, Nakuru, for the last 10 years, we've been closing industries. And I'm worried if we continue this way, we'll continue closing. So the collection of taxes will not be neither here nor there. It will be our industries alive. Are we able to sustain the manufacturing of the businesses in this country? Are we going to ensure that we ease the ease of doing our businesses in this country to attract the local and the foreign investors, so that when it comes to taxation, it's not a point there or a problem there. It is how do we ensure that doing business in this country, it is favorable, it is affordable, and it is easy and is attractive. Rather than it is make it harder. That's why people keep on talking taxation. It's not about the taxation, it's on how we use the business. Like now I was just looking at my phone and I saw that to fight the illicit brews is to ensure we remove the 250 ml, we put it to 750 ml. What science is that? Which science can we say that we are applying that? Then I've seen that there is, they've closed the second generation and they have remained the first generation. When you see the explanation of second generation and first generation, that you can extract ethanol from that non-crop, that's science anyway. I know the senators may not understand, but ethanol comes from the crop, from the the food crop, whatever, that's the sugar cane, the fruits that of this world. So I don't understand where we can get ethanol, none from, that is not coming from a crop. So here is about the illicit, non-compliance companies that are operating on a day-to-day, affecting the compliance ones. So it's to ensure the compliance is done, rather than it is now talking of the packaging, the second generation, the first generation. So we confuse the whole business. So it's how do we ease.
Next is Senator John Medhu Muya.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to come and support this report. From the onset, Honorable Speaker, I think I want to round the Senator Dr. Captain Ari Roba Red Committee for a job well done. For the 2 sessions, or for the longest time since he became chairman of this committee, he has been a very dedicated chairman. I meet him at the liaison committee, and I can see and I know, and based on what they have given us in the report, it tells you that they have done some very, very commendable work. Honorable Speaker, Article 96 of the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya, one of our very major roles, and is what we've been speaking since morning, Honorable Speaker, is to ensure that we protect counties and ensure that we push as much resources as we can to the devolved units, Honorable Speaker. So I am very, very in support of the proposal of the committee to send 415 billion up from the current 384 billion, Honorable Speaker, which will be a significant addition, Honorable Speaker, which also commensurates to the kind of transfer of services that we've been speaking about. It is in the policy proposals and recommendations that have been posed by the committee, Honorable Speaker. It puzzles me, Honorable Speaker, that the Commission on Revenue Allocation this time proposed a lower allocation to the county governments that they had proposed in the previous financial year, Honorable Speaker. I do not understand the logic, I don't understand the science, I don't understand the basis under which they used to calculate and see that with a bigger budget now, the counties deserve a 394 billion as their share of the allocation, Honorable Speaker. And in a smaller budget, the last financial year, they had recommended 407 billion, Honorable Speaker, for the county governments. If you read the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya, Article 216, on the functions of the commissions on the revenue allocation, their recommendations look like the umpire between the national government and the county government, Honorable Speaker. So it beats logic that they can propose in a smaller budget 407, in a bigger budget 394, Honorable Speaker. So I support the committee in pushing 415 billion, Honorable Speaker. Quickly going to the policy recommendation by the committee, Honorable Speaker, there is something that I have really liked, and it's something that is very commendable that has come out of this report by the Senator Roba Committee, which is the National Treasury, in collaboration with the COG, should fast-track development of the integrated county revenue management system, Honorable Speaker. As a member of the Public Accounts Committee, Honorable Speaker, and from the report that has been given by the Control of Budget, it puzzles most of us who are members of that committee that some counties are doing so well in own source correction of revenue, Honorable Speaker. Some counties have grown their revenue up to 2 times from where they found the collection of own source revenue, Honorable Speaker. But for some other counties, their own source revenue is shrinking, Honorable Speaker. It is out of this then that this integrated county revenue management system should be able to bring some uniformity in terms of growth, in terms of ensuring that we have the right systems, Honorable Speaker, to be able to support our county governments, even as we push 415 billion from the recommendation of Treasury, recommendations of CRA, recommendation of the Control of Budget, Honorable Speaker. The counties can be able to make far much more, Honorable Speaker, by ensuring that they can be able to get and ensure they seal all the loopholes, they seal all the leakages, Honorable Speaker, so that they can be able to take care of growing their own source revenue. With that, Honorable Speaker, I hereby support this report.
Thank you. Senator Gloria Magoma, Lobo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to support this report, Mr. Speaker. I want to also say that as we are sitting here in Senate and we must fiercely defend devolution and fight for more resources to go to the county, Mr. Speaker, we should also, in that same manner, be able to demand for accountability of those resources, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you'll find that there are some counties, from time immemorial, they have been getting resources. When it comes to the funds that are dedicated to marginalized counties, they get more resources. But Mr. Speaker, they cannot account for it. Mr. Speaker, a county like Wajir, Mr. Speaker, protect me from Senator Methu. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that in the same way that we are fiercely defending, and we must fight and continue to fight. In fact, this should move from 391 billion to even 500, Mr. Speaker. But to whom much is given, a lot more is expected, Mr. Speaker. When I look at the on-source revenue collection from some of these counties, Mr. Speaker, Wajir, Tana River, Mandera, Marsabit, these are counties that are getting a lot of resources, Mr. Speaker, for development, and they are supposed to improve on the economic activities. But over the years, we are not actually auditing what is being done in these counties, Mr. Speaker. So we are fighting for resources to go to counties, but we are the same people who are oversighting these counties. So therefore, we should also be able to go down and interrogate and find out why is it that Wajir County, for instance, is only collecting 46 million on source revenue, and you know, year in, year out, we are actually pumping in money there for a lot of things, and we don't know whether it is leading to development in terms of economic activities. Mr. Speaker, I also want to congratulate the Kenya Kwanza government, because, you know, we have even themed this budgeting to be able to sustain the bottom-up economic agenda, Mr. Speaker. You should know that this is a government that is intentional. From the time we made promises on when we were campaigning, down to a budget policy statement, Mr. Speaker. That is something to congratulate this government, Mr. Speaker. And finally, I want to say this on the issue of pending bills. We need to fiercely legislate on this issue, Mr. Speaker. There are counties, and my desk mate here from Embu can attest to this. There are counties that do not have all the resources come in, and if they have to deal with the pending bills, honestly, they are not going to do any kind of economic activity, any kind of development, Mr. Speaker. Counties like Kisii County, where I come from, if you look at the audited reports of the pending bills, it is insane, Mr. Speaker. So at one point, whether we like it or not, we must legislate on the issue of pending bills, and we have to be able to get a law that controls it, such that the governor that is in office cannot just be putting out tenders and all sorts of things, knowing that they are going to leave a huge amount of pending bills, Mr. Speaker. And I want to congratulate the committee on a job well done. And Mr. Speaker, I want us as senators to also go out there and sensitize Kenyans on this budget policy statement, so that Kenyans can also be able to understand why, for instance, we have to pay taxes, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Next is Senator Ezena, the Maritian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise also to commend the committee chaired by Senator Captain, His Excellency Dr. Ali Roba. And yes, soon. Mr. Speaker, I come with a few recommendations in conjunction with the youth of Kenya. I met about 4 groups of young people in this country from different organizations 2 days ago. And alongside with my proposals for the budget statement, I would like to note that on the health sector, mental health has been completely ignored to some good degree. Mr. Speaker, the amount ought to be spent on mental health in Kenya is 250 Kenya shillings per capita, according to the World Health Organization. But unfortunately, shamefully, we are only spending like 15 cents. Mr. Speaker, and the NHIF is also not very comprehensive as an insurance cover, while the private insurance policies are also discriminatory. In that regard, I would like to recommend that we have increased funding for mental health care professionals to reach psychologist-patient ratio of 1 to 15,000 against the current 1 to 4.6 million, and incorporate mental health modules in the competency-based curricula to address the alarming rates of suicidal behavior among adolescents. Secondly, I would wish to see the establishment of a functional referral county and mental health units in all the 47 counties and across the country, and integrate mental health services into primary health with the provision of comprehensive coverage of outpatient and inpatient care package by the Social Health Insurance Fund. Thirdly, set up a mental health fund for key vulnerable groups that are exposed to the burden of mental health, with a focus on the security and discipline forces, veterans, new mothers, gender-based violence recoveries, post-traumatic stress disorder survivors, youth, elderly, and prisoners. Mr. Speaker, these recommendations will incorporate with the Mental Health Policy Act of 2021-2025, give a roadmap for securing reforms and building strong mental health systems, with the ultimate goal of attaining the highest standard of mental health in Kenya. I take a particular note, Mr. Speaker, as the youth representative in this House, that we have at least about 65 cases of murder and 57 cases of suicide recovered in 2021 within the police service alone, according to the National Police Service. I can only imagine what the number will be in other sectors and across the country. Mr. Speaker, I also have a few recommendations on environment and climate change. One, at least I'm so happy that we have a tree planting initiative by the executive, which I undertook to do during the Christmas holidays.
Your time is up, Senator. Next we have Senator Mudigi Alexander.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa ruhusa niweze kuchangia. Naunga mkono kamati ya fedha katika Senate kwa kazi nzuri imefanya ndio iweze kuangalia vile county government zile ziko 47 ile kazi watakuwa akifanya. Ni vizuri kwa sababu mwaka uliopita ile pesa walikuwa wamepatiwa haikuweza kufanya kazi ile ingetakuwa kuwa katika masinani, na pia naunga mkono kwa hii pesa wameongezea bilioni 40, hata ingawa hata hizo asitosi wangeongezea bilioni 50 ndio iwe bilioni 425 kama vile mwaka jana maseneta magavana walikuwa wanahitaji hizo pesa, kwa sababu tukiangalia sisi maseneta kazi yetu ni kupigania devolution, vile magavana wanafaa wafanye kazi. Na ninashtuka sana kule masinani ile pesa nyingi serikali inapatia MPs, na wakiaulizwa ile kazi wanafanya haionekani. Kazi yao ni kung'ang'ana na kupigana na kuchangia vile gavana wafanyi kazi. Kwa hivyo nataka kusema kama ukiangalia kama Embu County mwaka jana ile pesa tulikuwa napatiwa haikuweza kutosha kwa sababu ya kitu inaitwa pending bill. Unakuta kila mwezi ule governor aliyoko anaitwa governor Sisile, pesa ya wage bill unakuta kila mwezi analipa milioni 250. Hizo kwa miezi 4 kama tumempatia zile pesa na miezi 4 unakuta bilioni 1 imeenda kulipa misahara, inambakia na bilioni kama 1 na hizo bilioni kama moja unakuta kwa zile pending bill ilikuwa ni bilioni 2,200,000 na pia kwa banki kulikuwa na pia na deni ya milioni 500 na pia akang'ang'ana na amelipa milioni 600. Kwa hivyo kwa miezi 4 alikuwa amembakisha shilingi milioni 400 na pia kuna kazi zile zingine za ofisi. Unakuta mpaka raia wanaingilia, wanaona katika Embu County na ile governor anakuwa ameng'ang'ana, hakuna kazi inaonekana amefanya ambaye inatakiwa ile pesa tumpatia percentage kama 30 iende kwa mpande ya mijengo. Unakuta kaunti nyingi tunajaribu, magavana wengi wamejaribu kufanya kazi lakini hakuna kitu wanafanya. Kwa hiyo naunga mkono magavana waweze kuongezewa pesa. Ile kitu muhimu ni sisi maseneta tuungane pamoja, tuwe kama as a team, tuwe tukienda kwa counties kuona vile watu wanafanya kazi. Kama ukiangalia kama mimi ni vice chairperson wa agriculture, unakuta mambo ya agriculture, kilimo 100% kwa senate na pia kwa masinani unakuta hata pesa ya kilimo imepunguzwa, na saa hiyo tunataka kilimo ni wale wanalima wause mazao yao na njia ile inafaa, na pia wapatiwe maji na vitu zingine. Unakuta hakuna mambo ya pesa ya kuongezea ile wataandika wale watu watakuwa wanafunza wakulima mambo ya kilimo. Kwa hivyo Bwana Speaker, mimi nikiwa Senator wa Embu County naunga mkono, na pia mambo ya pending bill na wage bill, mpaka wale watu wanaangalia mambo ya pesa waangalie vile county kama Embu sinafanya kazi. Mambo ya ajabu mpaka iangalie, kuna county zingine zimepatiwa pesa lakini hakuna kazi wamefanya. Kwa hivyo naunga mkono kwa hii pesa wapatiwe bilioni 415 ama bilioni 425. Asante Bwana Speaker.
Asante Senator Mudigi, na inaonekana Senator Mudigi ako na bank statement ya Embu County yote kabisa. Kwa hivyo nashukuru wewe unamulika mpaka hesabu kwa bank. Next is Senator William Cheptumo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator William Kisang, I said Senator William Cheptumo.
Yes, it is me.
And also to distinguish Cheptumo Kipkolil.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Speaker, I think it is now clear it is me. Mr. Speaker, I also arise to support this motion, and I want to really appreciate the work done by the committee led by Senator Roba and the Vice Chair Mutinda. Mr. Speaker, I want to raise about 3 issues. One is about the proposed increment of the shareable revenue in the 2024